Hey guys, tonight we step into the dust-choked air of a Roman morning, the kind that smells faintly of iron, sweat, and anticipation. You're standing in the bowels of a stadium older than most countries, wrapped in echoes of thousands chanting for blood. The sun is still rising, but the crowd above you is already hoarse with excitement. You blink up at the stone walls as they tremble with the thunder of stamping feet, and then it hits you. This isn't a game. It's not even a show. It's survival theater, and you, my friend, are the opening act. There's no armor yet, no sword in your hand, just a cheap linen tunic and a racing pulse. You hear the roar swell louder. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your local time and where you're watching from in the comments. I always love seeing the sleepy corners of the world coming together for this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward into the tunnel's warm darkness, past the torch brackets and the dried splatters of what might be wine ... or something redder. Ahead, sunlight slices into the corridor, a perfect rectangle that grows brighter with each hesitant step. You hear chainmail jingle, a whip crack, someone praying under their breath in Greek. And over it all, the stadium chants in waves. They're not calling your name, they're calling for death. Welcome to the Flavian Amphitheater, but you'll probably know it as the Colosseum. It's the largest ancient amphitheater ever built, completed in 80 CE under Emperor Titus, with seating for over 50,000. This place was basically the Netflix of Rome, but with more dismemberment and less buffering. The Colosseum was a monument to empire, spectacle, and power. It didn't just entertain them, it reminded them who was in charge. You pause just before stepping into the light. You're not the only one. Around you are men with haunted eyes and mismatched gear. Some bear scars from yesterday's fights. Others look freshly shackled. This isn't a tournament of champion. It's a meat grinder with better PR. And here's the kicker. You were never meant to win. See, most of the combatants in the arena weren't the well-trained gladiators you picture from movies. Sure, those existed, but many others were prisoners of war, enslaved people, criminals, or anyone Rome wanted to punish in public. The word gladiator comes from the Latin gladius, meaning sword butt. A lot of folks down here didn't even get one of those. Sometimes you'd be sent out with a stick, or worse, nothing at all. The odds. Let's just say Vegas wouldn't take this bet. And while the crowd loves a good fight, what they really want is a good show. It's not about who's strongest or smartest. It's about who bleeds the best. You don't need skill. You need timing, luck, and a very compelling scream. As you step into the sunlight, the heat slaps you in the face. Sand burns under your bare feet. All around you, the crowd explodes in cheers, not for you, specifically, but for the idea of you. Another piece of Rome's grand performance. Another body in the churn. Historians estimate that over the Colosseum's centuries of youth, hundreds of thousands of people and animals died within its arena. Think about that. This place has soaked in more blood than a hospital's worth of gauze. And for what? Entertainment, power projection, a sense of control. Some scholars still debate the exact purpose of certain events. How are they religious rites, civic punishments, or just really aggressive halftime shows? But most agree, fairness was never the point, and yet, the illusion of fairness was part of the draw. The audience wanted to believe they were watching real contests of valor. That's why the matchups were often styled with just enough balance to make them seem competitive on paper. But behind the scenes, things were rarely even. Age, health, weapons, numbers, any of these could tilt the odds. You glance up at the imperial box, where the emperor sits beneath a canopy, sipping from a goblet. A wave of his hand could grant mercy, or not. Either way, your life's worth about as much as the next cheer. A trumpet sounds, gates rise, and from the far side, something huge and angry lumbers forward. Let's just say, it's not your weight class. You flinch instinctively as the gate slams open. The beast emerges slowly, steam huffing from its nostrils. It's a bear, or at least it used to be. Starved, scarred, half mad from travel and captivity. This creature isn't a noble symbol of nature's strength. It's a pawn, just like you. And that's when it really hits you. This arena was never meant to showcase fairness. It was engineered brick by brick for dominance, illusion, and control. The Colosseum's very design tilts the game. From the moment you step onto the sand, you're playing in someone else's rigged board game. The architecture screams power. Towering tiers arranged by social class. with the emperor high above like a god passing judgment. The poor pack, the top leechers, squinting down at ants stabbing each other, while the wealthy lounge below in cushioned seats, close enough to taste the blood mist. Every detail of the structure reinforced the hierarchy. The best views, reserved for Rome's elite, only over the emperor's section. And, if you think the fighters got dressing rooms, think again. Most waited below-ground in cramped, damp holding cells, sometimes for days. Now here's a wild fringe tidbit. Beneath the arena floor, there was an entire labyrinth of tunnels and trapdoors called the hypergym. This network allowed stagehands to orchestrate animal releases, hidden entrances, even sudden terrain changes. Imagine fighting for your life, and then suddenly the floor opens, and a rhino charges out. Surprise. The Colosseum was an ancient machine of theater and control, and you're part of the gears. Historians still argue whether the seating assignments were strictly enforced or more fluid over time. But one thing's certain. The Colosseum wasn't a place for equality. It was a vertical diagram of Roman society with literal bloodshed as your entertainment. You dodged left just as the bear charges, its claws digging trenches in the sand. Your only weapon is a broken spear, and even that feels like a joke. Around you, the crowd cheers, not for your survival, but for spectacle. They want to see a man try to outwit a bear. They want to see guts and clever footwork and, if we're honest, a little screaming, but they don't want to see fairness. That's the mythos idea that Roman games were some kind of honorable duels, like knights in shining armor. Nope, more often, it was just psychological warfare in a marble stadium. You've got a bear and a stick. Good luck. And here's the dark joke. The Colosseum was built partially on the spoils of Vespasian, the looted treasures from the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE. That's right, Jewish captives helped build this monstrosity, stacking stone by stone a monument to their own defeat. You can still see that history carved into the Arch of Titus nearby. So, yeah, from its foundations up, this place is about dominance. Rome wanted to show the world that it could destroy, enslave, and entertain sometimes all at once. Another whistle blows, and the bear is yanked, away hoisted back down through a hidden lift, as if it never happened. The crowd groans. Not enough blood. They wanted more. And now you're standing alone in the middle, sweat soaking your tunic, dust sticking to your skin like paste. You survived ... this round. But don't get cocky. That was just the warm-up act. The real fun is about to begin. You glance at the far end again. A gate rattles. You brace. You've heard the rumors. Sometimes they send out multiple fighters. Sometimes they don't even tell you if it's a fight or an execution until the moment it starts. Because the Colosseum wasn't just designed to contain chaos, it was built to control how you felt about it. From the moment you walk in, you're not in your world anymore. You're in Rome's dreamland. It's a nightmare for everyone not in the front row. The gate creaks again. You tense. But instead of another wild beast or armed opponent, it's music. A small parade begins. Musicians with trumpets and flutes, costumed officials, and a few performers on stilts for no good reason other than flair. The crowd shifts from bloodlust to laughter. People throw bits of bread down from the upper seats. One hits your shoulder. You don't even flinch anymore. This isn't an intermission. It's part of the machine. It's the circus. In Britain's, but here, it's literal. You see, the Roman state kept its people in check, not with compassion or fair wages, but with a cunning mix of distraction and crumbs. The poet Juvenal coined the phrase panem, et susan spread, and circuses too, mock how easily Roman citizens could be pacified with cheap food and elaborate games. And nowhere was that more obvious than right here, in the Colosseum. Rome had a growing population, rampant inequality, and a lot of angry, jobless citizens. Sound familiar? So what did the emperors do? They gave them free food and a front row seat to someone else's pain. If you're starving, sure, but hey, at least you're not that guy being mauled by a leopard, right? Imagine every political scandal, every economic downturn, every unpopular law followed immediately by a sudden spike in public games. Bread was distributed. The arena opened, and the people cheered instead of rioting. It was crisis management through cruelty. The strategy worked so well that some emperors built their entire reputations around the arena. Emperor Trajan, for example, threw games that lasted 123 days. 123 days of combat, animal killings, and theatrical talk about running up the entertainment budget. Historians still argue whether these massive spectacles actually prevented revolts long term. or merely distracted people just long enough for another tax hike to slip through. But in the short term, bread and violence made people feel like Rome cared. You glance around at the crowd. They're laughing now, waving at the parade, tossing coins toward performers. This isn't just a place of death, it's a carnival. The floor's still bloody, you're still terrified, but the show must go on. And here's the part that really messes with you. Most of the crowd knows it's not fair. They don't care. In fact, they expect it. Nobody buys a ticket hoping for a tied match or a fair fight. They want drama, tragedy, betrayal, screaming, mercy, denied at the last moment. Fairness isn't entertaining. Unfairness is. Now, you see a team of attendants dragging a giant wooden platform into the center of the arena. It's painted like a boat, with fake waves on the sides. You've heard of this, a mock sea battle, or maybe an execution disguised as one. Hard to say. As they set it up, you spot another fighter across the sand dune, barely more than a teenager, gripping a wooden sword like it's a lifeline. He looks at you, wide-eyed, and nods, as if you're on the same team. You're not. Not really. That's another lie the Colosseum tells you, that this is a game, and you can win. But winning doesn't mean escaping. It means lasting slightly longer than the guy next to you. Let's slip in a weird tidbit here. At some of these games, organizers would stage entire myth-sending criminals out to act in plays where their characters die gruesome deaths. Except the deaths were real. You'd be cast as a mythological figure, like Icarus or Prometheus, and then actually burned, torn apart, or dropped from a high tower while the crowd applauded the realism. You were both actor and sacrifice. Imagine being sentenced to death with choreography. So yes, tonight's boat scene might be a comedy, or it might end with someone drowning in a puddle, while a guy in a Neptune costume laughs as you watch them prepare the set. A voice echoes in your mind, probably your own, reminding you that fairness never had anything to do with it. You're here for one reason, because Rome needs you to be here. Not you personally. Just ... summer. A role, a prop, the parade ends, the music fades. The boy across from you steps forward, nods again, and climbs onto the platform. Poor kid. You stay where you are. You're not next. Not yet. You exhale slowly, tasting dust and something faintly metallic, maybe blood, maybe rust, maybe both. The crowd quiets, expectant, all eyes fixed on the wooden boat in the middle of the sand, bobbing slightly as two assistants rocket back and forth with ropes to simulate waves. The boy stands shakily on the deck, his wooden sword pointed outward like a child playing pirate. But this isn't pretend. It never is. A second gate opens, and two more figures emerge. One is a towering man with real armor and a metal sword knot, not ceremonial. The other is in rags, shackled at the ankles, dragged out, and tossed onto the ship like cargo. Welcome to another Colosseum favorite, Naumachia, or mock naval battle. Normally staged on artificial lakes, sometimes they were adapted right here inside the Colosseum. Historians still argue whether the Colosseum could truly be flooded for full-scale water combat, or whether these were stylized dryland versions. Either way, the message stayed the same. Rome commands land and sea, and you are merely decoration. Today's version, it's just another thin veil draped over execution. The boy lunges with his wooden sword, hoping to make it look real. The armored man parries lazily, clearly instructed not to finish too fast. The crowd roars at the play fighting, but what they're waiting for is obvious. They want the execution to slip in casually like a punchline at the end of a joke. Sure enough, within moments, the shackled prisoner is shoved forward. There's some theatrical dialogue shouted in Latin, something about Poseidon's wrath and justice. Then a blade, a scream, the prisoner collapses, blood pooling darkly across the planks. The boy tries not to look. You don't, and neither does the crowd, because this is what they came for. Not a fair fight. A narrative of fairness, just enough pageantry to make the killing feel like art. That's what the Colosseum excelled at. Storytelling, not justice. Entertainment, not equity. The illusion that things might go differently. That maybe, just maybe, the boy could win. The prisoner could be pardoned. The lion could be tamed. But deep down, everyone knows how it ends. Rome doesn't do surprise twists. It does power, repetition, bloodshed, with a curtain call. And here's the gallows humor of it all. The Colosseum had trapdoors, pulleys, painted backdrops, revolving platforms, basically ancient stage tech. Some modern theaters don't even have that. The difference, in your school play, no one dies for real. Back to you now. You're still standing near the edge of the arena, acting like background. trying not to draw attention. You've seen enough for one day, maybe one lifetime. But the show goes on. Another performer enters, a man in leopard skins, waving a staff. The crowd chants. You recognize this one. He's playing a god, probably Mercury or Pluto. He struts around, blessing the fallen body on the boat, then dramatically stabs it again, just in case anyone thought it was fake. A few kids in the crowd cheer. A man nearby tosses a piece of fruit at the actor's feet. You notice the fruit is probably symbolic, probably not. That's another strange part of all this. The Romans didn't just want blood. They wanted meaning, ritual, theater. Every death had to say something, even if it was nonsense. You didn't just die. You became part of the story. A villain defeated, a criminal punished, got offended, but none of it was real. The boy on the boat, he survives for now because he played his part. The shackled man, he was never meant to survive. The outcome was fixed the moment they were paired. Just like everything else here. The crowd begins to chant again, louder this time. You hear a name, one that isn't yours. Good. The next act is starting. Maybe you've bought yourself a few more minutes. You back slowly toward the side gate, careful not to attract attention. One wrong look, and someone might throw you into the next mythological reenactment. You've seen those too. They involve a lot more fire than you're comfortable with. And so, while the arena turns its gaze to the next unfortunate soul, you slip into the shadows, heart pounding. You survived again, but not because of skill, or honor, or bravery. You survived because a spotlight passed you by. The tunnel is darker than before, or maybe your eyes are still adjusting after the raw glare of the arena. You lean against the cool stone wall, breathing slowly, the echo of the crowd muffled but ever present. Like a storm, you can still hear through thick walls. It's not silence, it's anticipation on pause. A man limps past you, his leg wrapped in a soiled cloth, one eye swollen shut. You recognize him vaguely. He fought yesterday and lost, but apparently not fatally. Not yet. You don't speak. Nobody does. Down here, words feel like bad luck. The underground corridors of the Colosseum were not just for holding fighters, they were for breaking them. Welcome to the Ludus the Gladiator training school, where training often meant beatings, starvation, and endless repetition. If you were lucky, you were chosen for actual instruction. If not, you were just another expendable body they kept alive long enough to bleed publicly. And here's the historical truth. Most gladiators weren't volunteers. While some octorati-free men chose the life in hopes of fame, debt relief, or simply food, the majority were enslaved, captured in war, or condemned criminals. For them, the arena wasn't an opportunity. It was a sentence. So, yes, when you read about famous gladiators, understand that their path to the spotlight was paved with chains. You sit on a crate, massaging your sore hand where you blocked a blow earlier. There's a bowl of water nearby, lukewarm, slightly brown. You drink anyway. It's cleaner than most of what you've had this week. Then comes the voice. Low, gravelly, and laced with sarcasm. You're still breathing. Must be your lucky day. You look up. It's a veteran. His name doesn't matter, just that everyone calls him the Mule. Probably because he's stubborn. Or maybe because he kicks hard. No one asks. He's survived a dozen fights, which in Colosseum math makes him a living legend. He tosses you a crust of bread. You catch it. Barely. It's stale, but edible. He nods once. Respect among the soon-to-be-dead. You get the bear or the kid. You hesitate, then say, both. He smirks. Then the gods must be drunk. He's not wrong. Survival here isn't skill, it's theater, chance, and timing. The trainers upstairs pretend to teach combat technique, but they're more concerned with teaching rhythm. How to fall dramatically. How to bleed convincingly. How to die with your arms outstretched, because the crowd loves that pose. And here's the fringe detail most people never hear. Some trainers were ex-gladiators themselves, kept on a short leash by the lanista, the manager who owned the fighters. The lanista wasn't just a coach. He was your warden, your employer, and your bookmaker all at once. Historians still argue whether these ludi were well-run schools or glorified prisons, but either way, they weren't optional. You obeyed, or you were punished, or worse, forgotten entirely. You bite into the bread and listen as the mule mutters to himself, sharpening a blade with a chunk of stone. You notice the blade is chipped. That's common. Most weapons aren't top quality. They save the fancy gear for showpieces to main events. Everyone else gets dull iron and old shields that crack on impact. He glances at you. You know how to fall without breaking your back. You shake your head, learn fast. Then he's gone. hobbling down the corridor toward another day, another fight, another moment under the boiling eye of the Roman sun. You finish the bread and stare at the wall. It's carved with dozens of names, scratched in by shaky hands. Some are just initials, some are prayers. One reads fail, Freda, farewell brother. And still, the crowd roars above you. You imagine them now, laughing, pointing, shouting, for blood. They'll never see this part, the waiting, the fear, the moments when even the strongest fighters cry quietly into their palms. There's no theater here, only truth. Your next match might be tomorrow, or in an hour, or never, you're not told. You're just lead. For now, all you can do is wait, and maybe hope the mule shows you how to fall before it's your turn to hit the sand again. Time in the underbelly of the Colosseum stretches like warm tar. Minutes melt into hours, or maybe it's the other way around. You've lost the thread. There are no clocks down here, only schedules dictated by screams, horns, and the thud of sand being swept. You're called, not by name. You don't have one here, just a nod from a guard who doesn't care whether you walk or crawl. You rise, joints protesting, and follow the shuffle of bare feet down another corridor. This time, it's not a beast, not a boy, not a theatrical prop. It's a man, and he's grinning. As you emerge into the fading afternoon light, the crowd greets you not with shock or awe, but with something worse, apathy. You're filler now, not a headliner. A middle-tier match to keep them amused between wine refills. Your opponent is taller, lean, and looks way too confident for someone holding a net. That's when it clicks. He's a Ricciarius, one of the most theatrical gladiator types. Net, trident, arm guard, light on armor, heavy on flair. You've seen them in action. Fast, flashy, dramatic. The crowd loves them. You, by contrast, have a small, curved shield and a stubby sword. That makes you a secutor, whether you train for it or not. Your job is to chase. His is to entangle and poke. Here's the twist. This fight looks fair on paper. Two gladiator types with historical matchups. Balanced. Right, wrong. The Ricciarius is favored not officially, but culturally. He's seen as clever, graceful, sexy, even. The secutor. Just muscle with no finesse. If the crowd's in a bad mood, they'll boo your every move. If they're drunk enough, they'll throw things. And what makes it worse, that grin, he's fought before. He knows what he's doing, and he knows you don't. The trumpet blows. You circle each other, sand sticking to your legs, the stadium pressing down like a hot breath. He throws the net. You dodge, barely. It misses, and the crowd gasps. Good gasp, bad gasp, who knows? You swing your sword. He dances back, trident at the ready. The choreography begins not because it's rehearsed, but because everyone in this ring is trained to perform survival, not achieve it. Historians still argue whether gladiators fought to the death regularly or only in special cases. Some say most matches ended with one fighter yielding. Others point to records of high mortality rates, especially among less experienced or unpopular fighters. What we know for sure is this: if the crowd didn't like you, the emperor might not either. And if the emperor turned his thumb the wrong way, curtain call. The Ricciarius stabs forward. You deflect, he spins. You slash. Sand flies, sweat, pause. A dozen moments pass in a blur of motion and noise, until suddenly he slips. Just for a second, his foot catches a rut in the sand. You're opening. You move on, instinct. Lunge, the sword slices across his thigh. It's shallow but dramatic. Blood arcs, the crowd erupts, and for the first time, you hear something new. For you, that changes everything. You press forward, shield raised, swinging hard enough to make him scramble. He's still faster, but the pain slows him down. His net is tangled. The trident glances off your helmet, ringing like a bell. Then he falls. Fully this time you stand over him, sword raised. This is it. The moment they decide, you look up. The emperor isn't watching. He's talking to someone, laughing. The crowd chants. It's not clear what they want. Some yell kill, some mercy. The noise blurs together, and then, mercifully, your opponent raises two fingers. The classic sign of surrender. You lower your blade. Attendants rush in. They'll carry him off. Patch him up, maybe. Or maybe not. You'll never know. But you're alive. You look back one last time at the sand. The blood. The net still coiled like a sleeping snake. Was that fair? Probably not. But fairer than usual. And in this place, that's a miracle. They don't let you bask in the victory. There's no trophy, no parade, no soft towel and cup of cold wine backstage. There's just a tired nod from a guard and the silent escort back down the passage of shadows. One flicker of success, snuffed out before it gets too bright. Back underground, it's somehow even hotter now. The air is thick and still, as if the building itself is holding its breath. You pass the mule again. He looks up briefly, then back at his sharpening stone. "You're still ugly," he grunts. It's practically a compliment. You sit, exhausted but wired. There's something adrenaline does to your body. It keeps you alert long after you should have collapsed. You're not sure whether you're proud or just lucky. You remember how close his trident came to your throat. There's a bucket of water in the corner. You wash your face and realize, for the first time, that you're smiling. Careful. Smiling can be dangerous in a place like this. And here's the thing, nobody told you about the Colosseum. Victory doesn't make you safe. It makes you valuable, which means they'll throw you back out sooner, not later. Like a popular act in a brutal circus. You're not retired. You're recycled. Your name still isn't worth remembering up top. But in the corridors below, it starts to spread. A few nods. A few murmurs. One guy whispers, "He took down Cassio the net dancer." That wasn't his name, but sure. Let the legend grow. You eat a bowl of something that might be porridge or might be bean paste. It tastes like warm chalk, but it stays down, and that's what matters. Then come the visitors. A handful of Roman officials stroll through the cells. They wear togas, too white, sandals to clean, and smiles that mean nothing. One of them pauses near your bench, tapping a scroll against his palm. He's got the look of someone deciding whether to buy a vase or a pig. This is another game one you don't train for. Sponsorship. In the world of gladiators, wealthy citizens or politicians often sponsored fighters, treating them like sports mascots or fashion accessories. A sponsor could get you better food, armor, even a better trainer, but it came with strings. You are theirs. Historians still debate the extent of these patronage networks, whether they offered real protection or just more exposure to political whims. Either way, if a man in a purple-trimmed toga likes your footwork, your whole life might change, or end faster. The man clicks his tongue and moves on. You're not exotic enough. Not yet. The mule chuckles when he's out of earshot. Next time, do a backflip. They love backflips. You ask, "You ever get sponsored?" He spits into the straw. "Once. Big merchant. Liked my spirit. Bought me new boots. Then bet against me the next fight." So much for loyalty. That's the heart of it, really. You can win. You can smile. You can bleed dramatically and hit all your marks, but this place doesn't care who you are. It cares what you perform. One guy across the room is practicing his death fall. Again and again, he staggers, spins, collapses. He times the gasp, the twitch, the final stillness. Another guy critiques him. "Too stiff. Try dropping the shield first." And it's funny, in a twisted way, how much time these men spend rehearsing the end. In the Colosseum, a good death can earn more cheers than a sloppy win. Here's your fringe fact for the day. Some particularly popular gladiators were buried with coins placed in their mouths. Not to pay the ferrymen, but because fans wanted souvenirs. Yeah, mouth coins. Probably don't Google that before bed. You finish your meal and lie down on the straw. Your whole body hums with leftover energy and pain. Every bruise has its own heartbeat. Above you, the crowd roars again. Someone else's turn. You close your eyes. And for just a moment, you're grateful. Not because you're safe, but because you're not the one out there pretending this was ever fair. Sleep never comes easy in the Colosseum. Not even in the quiet hours. When the crowd has trickled home, and the upper corridors echo with the groans of wooden brooms and the clink of bloodied armor being stacked, down below, you try to rest. But rest in a place like this feels like borrowing calm from a debt collector. So when the torchlight flickers again, and you're pulled to your feet by a gruff tug of the wrist, you're not surprised. Your legs protest, your ribs ache, but you follow. This time there's no other fighters waiting, no enemy pacing across the sand, no music, just you in the arena and something worse. An official stands in the middle, dressed in ceremonial red and black. His face is calm, bored even, as he reads from a scroll. It's not about you, it's about the condemned. They're bringing out a man in chains. He stumbles, shirtless, his body bruised and streaked with dried mud. His mouth is gagged, but his eyes scream louder than any trumpet. The crowd that returned for tonight's moonlit finale leans forward. This isn't sport. This is punishment dressed up like pageantry. They call it damnatio, Adibistious condemnation to the beasts. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You're not here to fight. You're here to assist. To make sure it happens. Maybe clean up if it doesn't go as planned. Maybe finish it if the beast gets bored. And here's the gut punch. You're not even sure what this man did. Theft. Rebellion. Insulted a senator's haircut. Doesn't matter. The crowd isn't here for justice. They're here for the drama. A gate groans open. The creature emerges lean. Muscular fur matted and eyes gleaming with panic. A leopard this time. Underfed, agitated, primed. And here's your quirky tidbit of the night. Some of these animals were imported from Africa, Asia, and beyond, kept in dark cells for days without food to heighten their aggression. Rome's hunger for spectacle didn't stop at human suffering. It extended to every claw or horn and fang it could afford. Historians still argue whether animals were trained or simply released with chaos as the goal. Some sources suggest handlers used hidden prods and ropes. Others describe entire departments responsible for managing these creatures, complete with feeding schedules and punishment routines. In short, animal cruelty wasn't a side effect, it was baked into the recipe. The man in chains sees the leopard. His legs buckle. The crowd cheers. You're told to hold the man upright. You don't move. Another guard shoves you. You obey, because disobedience here doesn't lead to demotion, it leads to replacement. And there's always someone willing to take your place on the sand. The leopard circles. Tension builds. The crowd goes deathly still. And then it pounces. The first contact is a blur clause, a twist, a scream, cut short. You flinch, but don't look away. You have to watch. That's part of the punishment. Not for him, for you. So you remember how thin the line really is. And then, as quickly as it began, it's over. The beast backs off, panting. The man lies motionless. The sand turns from gold to rust. Attendants drag the body away. Another team leads the leopard back through the gates, throwing chunks of meat ahead of it to keep it focused. You are left standing there. The crowd roars for the emperor, who isn't even present tonight. They cheer anyway, like trained dogs. And you bow mechanically. Not for glory, not for pride, for survival. You're led back inside, the air behind the gate cooling your sweat-soaked skin. Someone says your name, not your real name, your fight name, your stage name. The one they'll write on the board next to the schedule tomorrow. You're not sure whether to be honored or afraid. Because here, every time your name is written down, it could also be the last time you sit awake longer than usual after that one. Even down in the tunnels, the air still carries the echo of what happened. Not the screams, not the roaring crowd. No, just the silence that followed. The kind of silence that stretches over something awful and tries to smother it, but fails. The mule doesn't say anything when you return. He just shifts over on the bench and leaves a space. You sit. That your first beast show? He finally asks. You nod. Don't worry, he mutters. Second one doesn't feel any better. You ask, quietly, why do they make us help? He shrugs. Because they can, and that's the answer for most things here. You lie down, eyes open, tracing the cracks in the ceiling. You think about the leopard's eyes, how it looked more scared than angry. You think about the condemned man. You wonder if he had family, if someone out there still thinks he's alive. Then you think about tomorrow, because in the Colosseum, tomorrow isn't promised, but it is scheduled. The next morning, you're rousted earlier than usual. The guards are more hurried. One is even polite. That's how you know something's off. They lead you not to the arena, but to a training yard. Real sunlight, real air. There, a new group of fighters is assembled. Fresh faces. Fresh fear. One of the trainers nods at you. Show them the basics. You blink. You're not a teacher. You've barely survived yourself. But in Colosseum math, surviving 2 fights and not screaming during a beast execution qualifies you for mentorship. So you do as told. You demonstrate footwork, sword grips, how to pivot without falling, how to roll and get back up without losing your teeth, how to pretend you've trained longer than you have. One kid vomits during war. Another asks if the lions really eat people. You don't answer, but something shifts. The others look at you differently now. Not like a celebrity, no one's that foolish, but like a landmark, proof that survival is possible, even if temporary. You correct a guy's stance and notice his hands are shaking. You want to tell him to fake confidence. The crowd smells fear like a pack of dogs. Instead, you just say, keep your knees loose. You don't want to die stiff. The mule passes by later with his usual slow limp. He watches for a while, arms crossed, then mutters, teaching now, huh? Next stop, Emperor, you smirk. He'll need a stunt double. Here's the quirky tidbit of this morning. Some gladiators, if they lived long enough and gained enough crowd favor, could become celebrities. Endorsements, fans, even romantic offers from the upper class. Graffiti praising fighters has been found all over Pompeii. One inscription reads, Celedus, the Thracian, makes the girls sigh. Another simply says Crescens, the net fighter, the delight of all the girls. It wasn't glory like you'd imagine. It was more like dangerous fame. You could be admired and enslaved, celebrated and disposable. Historians still argue whether gladiator status offered any real upward mobility. Some believe a few earned their freedom through success. Others think even the most famous were one bad match away from being forgotten. What's clear is this. Fame didn't mean fairness. It just meant a louder cheer before you bled. After training, you're handed a better meal. Bread that isn't rock hard, a hunk of cheese, even some figs. You eat alone in the corner, watching the sky. It's blue today. Clear. You imagine what Rome looks like beyond the walls, the markets, the temples, the endless rows of homes, built atop homes. You wonder if anyone out there even knows your name. Then a horn blows. Your next match has been posted, and once again, you belong to the sand. You read the match slate the way a condemned man reads a poem. Carefully, hoping the rhythm doesn't end with a noose. Your name is there, right beside another. You've never heard of him, but the reaction around you says plenty. One fighter goes pale, another mutters something in Greek you don't understand. The mule, lounging nearby, just grins. Tavros, he says, cracking his knuckles. They're pulling out the crowd pleasers. You don't ask for clarification. You don't want to know, not yet. You prepare in silence, tightening the worn straps of your greaves, adjusting your belt, checking the blade's edge out of habit more than hope. Your armor is standard scuffed bronze, a chipped shoulder plate, a helmet with too little padding and too much dent. The corridor feels longer this time, and hotter. You step onto the sand under a mid-morning sun, sharp and merciless. The crowd is already loud, buzzing with anticipation like flies around spoiled meat. They know something's coming, and they're excited. Across the arena, the gate lifts, Tavros enters, and you understand the reaction. He's enormous. Not just tall, broad arms, like tree trunks. A helmet shaped like a bull's head, complete with gleaming horns. His chest plate is painted crimson, not from blood though. Surely it's been soaked in enough of it, but by design. It's part of his character, his myth, because Tavros isn't just a fighter, he's a persona, a walking story. The Minotaur reborn, and the crowd eats it up. He lifts a heavy axe with one hand like it's made of feathers. You're not sure what you're supposed to do with your short sword and hope at this point, but you step forward anyway, because what else is there? The crowd begins to chant. Tavros, you're not even in the song. You're the background dancer nobody asked for. The trumpet sounds. He charges. You dive left, barely avoiding the first swing. His axe buries itself in the sand where your chest was a second ago. You slash, sparks fly as your blade scrapes his shoulder guard. He doesn't even flinch. This isn't a fight. It's a spectacle. You realize it. Now Tavros isn't here to test his skill. He's here to perform, and you're his prop. He spins, sweeping the axe in a wide arc. You leap backward, stumble, roll. The crowd loves it. A woman in the front row tosses flower petals. Are they for him or your funeral? Here's the historical fact for this round. Some gladiators were elevated into characters, complete with costumes, backstories, even catchphrases. The arena became a stage for legends, some real, some invented. These men weren't just athletes. They were icons, and like all icons, they required an audience. And victims, Tavros feints left, then swings low. You duck, jab forward, catch him in the thigh. A shallow cut, but it's blood, and the crowd erupts. He grunts. It's the first time he acknowledges pain. He turns slower now. You circle. You have no plan, just instincts. Stay moving, stay breathing. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some famous gladiators were known not for how many people they killed, but how many fights they survived. A record of skillful dodging could earn just as much respect as brute strength. One gladiator, Flamma, reportedly fought 34 times and was awarded the Rudiza wooden sword symbolizing freedom 4 times. Chose to keep fighting, maybe because it was the only life he knew, or maybe the outside world had nothing for him anymore. Back in the arena, Tavros is bleeding. Not much, but it's enough. The crowd shifts. There. Chant. Stutters. Some begin cheering you now. You faint, right? He takes the bait. You slash left catch a sigh. Another roar. He roars, too. Whether in rage or rehearsal, it doesn't matter. It sells the scene. But now you see it. The myth bleeds. You've pressed the advantage. You move like you've trained for this your whole life, not just survived it. Then, he slips. One foot catches on uneven sand. He stumbles. You move. In blade. Raised. And then, you freeze, because, out of the corner of your eye you see it. The Emperor has stood. Everyone goes quiet. You look up. He holds out his hand. Thumb extended. The classic gesture, but it doesn't drop. Not yet. Historians still argue over what the thumb gesture really meant. Was a thumbs up the kill signal? Or was it the opposite? Did it vary by Emperor? Or did the crowd just imagine it mattered more than it did? Right now, all you know is this. Your sword is up. The arena is silent. And Tavros is waiting. The Emperor turns his hand slowly. The thumb tilts. Down. And the crowd goes wild. But not for you. For the blood. You step back. Just enough. You won't do it. Not today. You drop your sword. The guards rush in. They'll handle it. You're done performing. For now, they drag you back through the gate. Not gently, but not cruelly either. Just methodically. Like a tool being put away. You walk under your own power, though your knees threaten to betray you. The blood you spilled wasn't yours. And maybe that's why your limbs feel heavier than usual. It wasn't survival this time. It was defiance. And defiance has a price in Rome. Back underground, you're not met with applause. There is no warm meal or victory wreath waiting. Just faces. Some of them nod at you with respect. Others look away, like they're afraid your choice might be contagious. The mule shakes his head. You let him live, he says. Tone unreadable. You shrugged. He slipped. He leans in closer, voice low. That's not the kind of thing this place forgets. You both know he's right, but you also both know the unspoken truth. The crowd loved it. And that matters, because the Colosseum is like a god with mood swings. It punishes, rewards, forgets, and remembers based on whatever pleases it in the moment. And today, the moment worked in your favor. By evening, the whispers have started. You're not just the one who fought the net guy anymore. You're the one who spared Tavros. And that name, it sticks. Because Tavros bloody limping, but alive was seen carried out. And the crowd saw you hesitate. They saw you drop the sword. They saw a story, and Rome loves a good story almost as much as it loves control. The next day, you're summoned not to the sand, but to a holding room you've never been in before. It smells better, for one. There's incense burning, a tapestry on the wall, and there's a man sitting in a carved chair, dressed in fine linen, eyes sharp. A sponsor. I like a fighter who knows how to pace a narrative, he says, not just swing steel. He offers you a cup of watered wine and a deal. Better lodging, custom armor, maybe even training with his personal physician. In return, you wear his crest when you fight. You nod, because what else do you do? Congratulations, you're now a sponsored killer. Here's a historical fact for you. Sponsorship was a real aspect of the gladiator economy. Wealthy Romans often backed fighters like racehorse owners today, investing in them, branding them, sometimes even naming them. Sponsored fighters might receive better meals, medical care, and equipment. But they also became walking advertisements. It was less a rescue, more a rebranding. And your fringe tidbit. Sometimes, a gladiator's popularity would lead to absurd requests from fans. Love letters, requests for hair clippings, even blood in little containers, allegedly for luck. There are records of women swooning over particularly handsome gladiators who, let's remember, were also literal property. Historians still argue whether these relationships ever offered real power to the fighters, or if they were just more layers of exploitation dressed in affection. But in the Colosseum, every relationship was transactional, even the adoration. Back in the training yard, you're handed a new shield. It's not flawless, but it's solid. Your sponsor's insignia stylized hockers painted across the front in deep red. You stare at it for a moment. You've leveled up, which means the audience's expectations will, too. You're not just fighting for your life anymore. You're fighting for branding. Later that night, the mule joins you at the water basin. He eyes the new gear, then grunts. Don't let that crest get in your head, he says. You nod, because when the crowd loves you too much, he says, they start wanting to see how you die. You want to argue, but you don't. Because you know he's right. The new armor fits snugly, almost too snugly. The crest of the hawk gleams on your chestplate, freshly painted, red on bronze. You stare at it as the sun rises over the Colosseum, throwing long shadows across the sand. But to the crowd, you've become a different person. Or rather, a character. And the thing about characters is, they're only as good as their final act. Your next match is scheduled for noon. Prime time. That's not a compliment. That's pressure. Your sponsor meets you again in the shaded alcove near the tunnel. Try to favor your right side today, he says casually, as if recommending a haircut. It photographs better. You raise an eyebrow. Not really, he adds. But the Emperor's niece is watching from that angle. He smiles and walks off, leaving the bitter taste of performance in your throat. This is what victory buys you in the Colosseum. Expectations. The match today is a crowd pleaser. They've brought back the net fighter. He limps now, his left leg still healing from your cut, but his trident gleams sharper than before. The crowd cheers wildly as you both enter. They recognize you. They recognize him. This is the sequel they didn't know they needed. And once again, the odds are stacked only this time. You know it. The net fighter opens with a feint. You dodge, sidestep, counter. Your sword clangs off his arm guard. The cheers grow louder, but something's wrong. He's faster. Too fast for someone recovering from a leg wound. You glance down. No limp. It hits you. The limp was part of the act. He was never injured. This isn't a rematch. It's a trap. Rome's favorite twist. The hero's downfall. You tighten your grip on the sword, adjusting mid. So, that's how it's going to be. This isn't about fairness. It never was. This is about a narrative reversal. The sponsors, new golden boy versus the wronged underdog. The Colosseum isn't a battleground. It's a writer's room. And you're in a rewrite. You parry, you duck. You nearly slip on a patch of sand that's darker than the rest. Sweat stings your eyes. Your helmet feels heavier. But here's what they forgot. You've learned. You've seen too many matches, too many surprises, too many redemptions. So you start giving the crowd what they think they want. A little stumble, a slow recovery, a dramatic gasp as his neck catches your leg but not fully. Just enough for suspense. He moves in, confident. That's when you strike. Your blade rips across his exposed side, slicing beneath the arm guard he thought was enough. He screams. The crowd screams louder. You tear free of the net, toss it aside, and raise your sword. Cheers now. Wild, joyous. They love you again. You step back. Offer your opponent a hand. He takes it, eyes wide, blood dripping. He knows. You've saved him. Because, you know what happens to a fighter who wins too cleanly, too fast. He gets recast. And you're not ready to leave the script just yet. You both leave the arena alive. The Emperor applauds. Your sponsor claps politely. And back in the tunnel, the mule meets you with his usual look. He says, "You shrugged. Gave them the ending they wanted." He raises an eyebrow, even though it wasn't true. You wipe your face with a rag, especially because it wasn't true. Here's your mainstream fact. Many Gladiator matches weren't to the death. They were choreographed, semi-controlled performances, still brutal, still dangerous but not always final. There were referees, hand signal, pre-arranged outcomes, especially for fighters with high value. Your fringe detail. Some gladiators carried stage names and played the same roles again and again. One might always be the doomed hero, another, the cocky villain. Some even wore specific colors or insignias, early brand, loyalty, ancient style. And as for whether the crowd understood the illusion, historians still argue whether the Roman audience believed what they saw or just wanted to believe. You change out of your gear, and as you run a hand over the hawk crest on your chestplate, you realize you're no longer just fighting opponents. You're fighting the script. The next day, you don't fight. You perform. That's what the schedule says. Anyway, you've been assigned to a Venacio or staged hunt, one of the most brutal forms of entertainment the Colosseum had to offer. Only this time, you're not the you're the hunter. The irony isn't lost on you. A few weeks ago, you were the fresh meat praying not to be trampled by a panther or mauled by a bear. Now, you're the man in bronze, standing in the center of the arena, a spear in one hand and a leash in the other. At the end of that leash is a dog, one of Rome's prized Molossian warhounds, armor-plated, silent, and trained to attack anything that moves. The gate across from you begins to rise. You know what's coming before the crowd does. You were told in advance by the sponsor's assistant, with all the detachment of someone choosing between appetizers. Today it's 2 leopards and 1 condemned man dressed like a satyr, he'd said. Keep it light. The crowd's eating. and there he is now. The prisoner. He stumbles forward in a ridiculous goat-leg costume, a mask with curled horns, and a tunic barely covering his bruises. He's pushed onto the sand, and a handler cracks a whip behind the leopards to drive them out next. You stand in the middle, watching the scene unfold, and suddenly you're not sure who you're supposed to be. A hero, a butcher, a stagehand. The Colosseum, at your side, tenses, eyes locked on the spotted cats, now circling. The crowd laughs, cheers, some boo, others throw olive pit. The Satterman pleads, not with words, but with frantic gestures. His hands are bound, his mouth gagged. The mask shakes slightly with every breath. You don't move, not until they signal. A white cloth drops from the imperial box, fluttering down like a dove that's lost its way, and that's when the game begins. You loose the dog, it surges forward, barking once, claws digging into the sand. The leopards react instantly, one bolts left, the other right. Chaos blooms. The satyr scrambles, tries to run, trips on his own ridiculous hooves. The dog lunges not at him, but at the closer leopard. They clash in a blur of fur, muscle, and snarling noise. You run toward the other one, spear raised. You're not supposed to kill it immediately. The crowd doesn't want that. They want danger, tension, theater. So you miss the first jab on purpose. The leopard hisses, swipes, clips your arm. You bleed just a little, just enough to make it real. You step back. The crowd gasps. Someone stands up in their seat. This is how it works. The satyr man is forgotten for the moment, crawling behind a wooden prop tree. The dog has the first leopard pinned. You twirl the spear once, then strike. The second leopard falls. Not instantly, but fast. The satyr peeks out. You lock eyes. And in that moment, you make a decision. You turn to the imperial box and raise your hand, not with a weapon, but with an open palm. A plea. The audience quiets. Confused, you point to the satyr. You give the tiniest bow. You're not begging. You're offering. Historians still debate how much power the emperor had in these moments. Was he truly the final decider of life and death? Or did he read the mood of the crowd? Was it all symbolic? Whatever the truth, today the emperor nods. The satyr lives. Barely you walk to him, help him up, and lead him back toward the gates. He stumbles beside you, still in his stupid goat legs. You wonder if anyone will remember his name, or if they'll just remember that the hunter showed mercy. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Venetians were staged with elaborate backdrop trees, fake hills, even painted scenery. They turned the arena into a play, and the animals were the unwilling cast. But the message never changed. Rome conquers nature. Rome conquers man. Unless, of course, you remind them that stories can be rewritten. Back in the tunnel, the dog is chained again. You pat its head, it doesn't wag its tail. It's tired, like you. The satyr is taken away, alive. And you're starting to understand your role more clearly now. You're not just fighting anymore. You're directing the crowd. You wake the next day to something strange. Applause. Not roaring, not chanting, but applause. The slow, deliberate kind. The kind that sounds more like approval than excitement. And that's what scares you. Because now, you're not just being watched. You're being celebrated. The satyr story made it out of the arena. It seems spread through the streets of Rome faster than spilled wine. Word is, some say the merciful Hulk spared a man and slayed 2 leopards with style. Others say it was staged. Some even claim you and the satyr were brothers. The truth, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that people are talking. Your sponsor visits again, new tunic, new perfume, same toothy grin. You're on fire, he says. Even the women at the temple baths are gossiping. One swore you looked like Mars reborn. He laughs, then adds, you don't, by the way, but you are marketable. He hands you a scroll. It's your next billing. You scan it, then blink, because it's not just your name this time, it's hers. Bologna you've never met her, but you've heard the stories. She's one of the few women to step into the arena and walk out again. And not just once, a handful of times. Enough to earn a following, and in Rome, that's everything. You ask key match. Your sponsor shakes his head. Exhibition versus, don't worry, it's for show. Just keep it dramatic, keep it respectful, and keep your face intact. Women fighting in the arena wasn't common, but it happened. Roman sources confirm that gladiatresses, as they were called, were featured in select events, often as novelties. Their presence was meant to shock, titillate, entertained occasionally, impress. They were not taken as seriously as men, but sometimes they outshone them. Historians still debate whether these women were truly trained or simply costumed for the crowd. Some evidence suggests real combat skills. Others say they were thrown in as spectacle, like trained dancers expected to swing blades. Either way, Bellona isn't a dancer. She's waiting when you enter the arena, tall and lean, armor dark and simple. No frills, no masks, just a straight blade and steady eye. The crowd is already leaning forward in anticipation. This isn't about blood. This is about chemistry. You approach, she nods. The trumpet sounds, and you begin. At first it's careful, measured. Steel taps, steel sparks fly, but it's all surface. The crowd murmurs. They want more. So you give them more. You push harder. She parries, spins, counterattacks. Your shield rattles under the impact. You grin, she does too. And just like that, it's no longer a charade. You're fighting, not to win, but to challenge. You both fall into rhythm. She feints high. You duck low. You dodge right. She pivots left. A dozen exchanges in a minute, each one more intricate than the last. This is the first time since entering the Colosseum that the person in front of you doesn't want to kill you, and doesn't want to lose to you either. She just wants to prove she belongs, and she does. You slip once she lands a strike to your shoulder. Light, but real. The crowd erupts. Then she steps back, drops her sword, and raises your arm. You hesitate, then raise hers in return. Mutual respect. The crowd loses its mind. Here's your fringe tidbit. An inscription was once found that commemorated a female gladiator named Achilles who fought in armor styled after the legendary warrior Achilles. Whether the fight was real or symbolic is still debated, but she was remembered, and that's rare. Back in the tunnel, Bellona walks beside you. Good show, she says. You nod. Likewise, she doesn't smile, but she doesn't scowl either. Just tosses a rag over her shoulder and disappears into the shadows. The mule greets you near the barracks. You fight her, he asks. You nod. He raises his eyebrows. Did you win? You think for a moment, and say, don't think that was the point. He grins. Smart answer. Because in the Colosseum, not every fight is for survival. Some are for status, and in this match, both of you just climbed a little higher. The next morning, you're awakened not by a guard's boot, but by a messenger with gold thread trim on his tunic. Get dressed, he says, without looking at you. You're being summoned to the Imperial box. You sit up slowly. That's not a sentence you hear every day. The other fighters glance up from their rations and sharpening stones. Even the mule stops chewing the box, he muttered. Hope they're not looking for volunteers. You dress quickly. New tunic, cleaned armor. The Hulk crest polished so brightly you catch your reflection for the first time in days. Then, escorted by two heavily perfumed guards, you take a staircase you've never seen before. Each level feels stranger than the last. You've lived so long in the sand and tunnels, you forgot the Colosseum even had a sky. The Imperial box is vast, shaded, cushioned, gilded in golden ivory. And from this height, the arena doesn't look like a battlefield, it looks like a stage. A small one. A woman greets you, sharp-eyed, finer clothes than you've ever touched. She's not the Emperor's niece, but she might as well be. Probably married to someone important. Probably powerful in her own right. You're taller than I expected, she says, circling you once like an appraiser sizing up a horse. And quiet. You nod, unsure of the script here. She waves toward a mosaic bench. You don't sit until she does. I watched your last 3 matches, she says, crossing her legs elegantly. I've seen fighters bleed, stumble, kill, beg, but I rarely see restraint. You stay silent. There's no safe answer. She continues. Do you know how rare it is to find someone the crowd likes who doesn't embarrass themselves when they open their mouth? Another nod. She leans forward. We're expanding. You blink. Expanding games, she says. In the provinces, Alexandria, Carthage, Ibu and Batia, eventually. Rome can't host all the bloodletting on its own anymore. You're starting to get it. You want me to travel? You say. She smiles. We want you to represent. This is something new. An old Rome didn't just kill for local crowds, it exported violence. Games were hosted across the empire, sometimes in amphitheaters, sometimes in repurposed town squares, and often local populations were forced to participate or watch, to fight, to die. It was Rome's way of saying, we own you, even your entertainment. You ask, how long? She stands. A year, maybe 2. You'll be escorted, you'll be displayed like silverware, but you'll live, and you'll be remembered. And then she adds, of course, if you say no, you don't need her to finish the sentence. You say yes. That afternoon, you're led back down, but not to your cell, to a better room, with a door that locks from the inside, a cot with a cushion, bread that isn't stale, wine that's not vinegar. The mule visits once later. Going north, he asks. You nod. He scratches his chin. Lucky. Then, after a beat, or unlucky, you ask, you ever leave? He chuckles. They offered once, said I'd fight in Gaul. I told him to bite a snake. You smile. Stay alive out there, he adds. And if you see any Gauls, don't trust their wine, or their women. Here's your mainstream fact. Gladiators were indeed sent to provinces to perform. Their presence helped pacify and impress distant Roman citizens. They were ambassadors of violence, symbols of Roman dominance, and, sometimes, sources of imperial propaganda. And here's your fringe tidbit. In some cities, foreign gladiators were forced to adopt Roman names and backstories to make them more palatable to local audiences. Your identity wasn't just sold, it was edited. As night falls, you lie on your new cot and stare at the ceiling. You're not free, but you're moving, and that, for now, feels like victory. Your transport leaves before sunrise, while the city still snores behind its marble walls. No fanfare, just a covered cart, 2 guards on horseback, and a leather pouch stamped with your sponsor's crest. You don't even get to say goodbye to the mule, which feels unfair, considering how long he watched your back with nothing but sarcasm and a wet. You travel in silence for hours. The road out of Rome is lined with milestones, the stone markers counting down your distance from the center of the world. As they shrink behind you, you begin to feel something unexpected, lighter, until the cart rolls into the next town, and the crowd is already waiting, because word travels faster than wheels. The local amphitheater is smaller, made of limestone instead of marble, with wooden scaffolding that creaks like old bones. But the faces in the stands, they're just as eager, just as loud, just as thirsty. You're led through the back corridor, Anastasia vu different stones. Same shadows. Only this time, there's a surprise. New partner, the guard says, gesturing to a fighter strapping on greaves. He's short, broad, smiling like he knows something you don't. And then he speaks. Name's Skadu, he says. From Numidia, they say, you're the guy who spared the satyr. You blink, he adds. Don't worry, I'm not dressed as a goat. He laughs at his own joke. You try to smile. The match today isn't a duel. It's a display of Munera Sign Missione, a choreographed team bout meant to entertain, not execute. Still, you know how fast a staged fight can turn real. Kadu spins his spear once and nods toward the gate. They want exotic, he says. That's why they paired us. And there it is, the ugly truth behind your itinerary. This isn't diplomacy. It's death tourism. Rome exports its power through blood and performance. And if you happen to look foreign enough, you become part of the Empire's most grotesque world tour. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Provincial games were often used to show off Rome's reach. They imported animals, prisoners, and even gladiators to impress local audiences and remind them of the capital's might. But here's your fringe tidbit. Some of these so-called foreign fighters were actually locals dressed in exotic costumes. The illusion mattered more than authenticity. As the gates open, you and Kadu step into the sun together. The crowd whistles, some clapping just to show they understand the reference. The arena's announcer bellows your names, his voice, thick with theatrical flair. Kadu of Numidia and the Hawk of Rome. The fight unfolds in stylized waves. First, 2 bandits charge, swords raised. You dispatch one with a shield bash while Kadu sweeps the legs of the other and pins him with his spear tip just above the throat. The man taps out. Next, a beast of wild boar, snarling and frothing races from the opposite gate. You brace, but Kadu throws a net instead of a spear, catches the animal around its midsection. It flails, confused, tangled. The crowd laughs. Relief. They didn't want gore today. They wanted entertainment. You're adapted. And that's the real fight now. Afterward, you're handed a cloth with your sponsor's sigil again. This time, it's embroidered in gold. That's a message. You played your role. You kept it pretty. Backstage, Kadu wipes sweat from his brow and says, you're lucky. You're still new. You cock your head. New. New to them, he says. Means they haven't decided how you die yet. He tosses his rag into a bucket and claps you on the shoulder. But keep it interesting long enough, and maybe they never will. That night, you sleep in a room with real walls. Candles, a servant even brings water that isn't brown. But the dreams come anyway, of leopards, of satyrs, of crowds that cheer too loud for mercy and too long for death. And when you wake, the pillow feels heavier than it should. You turn it over and find a silver coin with your face carved into one side. They've started minting souvenirs. You're not just a fighter now, you're a product. The coin weighs almost nothing in your hand, but it drags at your thoughts like an anchor. Your face on silver crudely done, a lopsided smirk you've never made in your life. Around the edge, Aquila Misericords, the merciful hawk. You stare at it for a long time, then you put it away, because you've seen how quickly heroes turn into footnote. The next week is a blur of towns and townspeople, of sand arenas and timber stages. Each one feels like a half-built copy of the last. The same painted banners, the same faint gasps from the crowd, the same rich men in clean togas placing bets as if your ribcage is their dice cup. And each time you fight, you're fighting someone else's script. One match, you're cast as a barbarian turned rebel. In the next, a Roman hero avenging a wronged sibling. Cadu laughs every time. We're actors now, he says, just with sharper props. In Alexandria, you're made to wear a wolfskin cloak and roar at the moon like an animal. The crowd eats it up. They toss grapes. One woman throws a sandal. You don't ask why. But what sticks with you isn't the laughter, it's what happens backstage. Because that's where you meet the prisoners. The ones who aren't playing roles. Imported from the edge of the empire, Gauls, Thracians, a couple of Egyptians, all chained, all quiet, all staring at the walls like they've already seen what's coming. These are the real condemned. No costumes, no coin faces, no second acts. Their fate is damnatio ad bestias again. Not a show this time, a sentence. They don't get shields or fake backstories. They get tossed into the arena at sunrise and fed to whatever beast made it through the last fight. Cadu watches with you from the shadows. His jaw is tight. They brought 20, he says. That'll last 3 days of games. You ask, why 20? Because that's how many the governor promised. And there it is, again the math of death. Calculated, budgeted, justified. The crowd doesn't know, or maybe they do. Maybe they pretend it's different when the man in the arena is wearing chains instead of a sponsor's crest. That night, your match is delayed. They need to clear the sand. Too much blood, too many pieces. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Rome transported thousands of prisoners across the empire specifically to be executed in public games. The practice wasn't just for punishment, it was a demonstration. A reminder that no one was beyond Rome's reach. And your fringe tidbit. Some provincial leaders were required to supply victims as part of their yearly duties. They weren't even chosen by guilt or crime. Sometimes, they were simply a quota. You return to your quarters and find a tray of dates and figs waiting. A clean cloth. A scented oil you didn't ask for. You don't touch any of it. Cadu enters later, tosses a coin onto your table. His face is on it now, too. Guess they finally noticed me. He says, you raise an eyebrow. Thought I'd be proud, he adds, but it just makes me wonder who'll be holding this after I'm gone. You nod slowly, because once you've become a symbol, it's easy to forget you're still human underneath. You lie in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, trying not to hear the sounds from the arena distant now, but present, always present. And you realize something terrifying. You're no longer afraid of the crowd. You're afraid you'll stop feeling anything at all. Morning brings no peace, just more sand. But this time, the arena is different. It smells like seawater. You step out into the sun and stop short. The floor of the amphitheater has been transformed. Wooden planks line the central ring, raised just slightly above the sand. Painted waves ripple along the edges. Sail-shaped banners flutter in the breeze. And in the center, a boat, or at least, a painted imitation of one. Cadu whistles low behind you. Namakia, he says. Mock sea battle. You nod, already tasting the memory. You've seen one before, the satyr, the leopards, the carefully staged chaos. But this is bigger, grander. The governor of this province is sitting in the shade, fanning himself with a peacock feather fan, and beside him, a whole delegation of Roman officials in traveling cloaks. This isn't just sport, it's diplomacy. Rome knows how to impress a visiting senator, with pageantry and painted chip sand. The occasional drowning man, a local official approaches, eyes twitching with nerves. You'll be playing the part of a Carthaginian pirate, he says breathlessly. The crowd loves pirates. Very topical. You ask, and the other side? Rome, of course. Of course. You're handed a curved blade. a faded blue sash, and a helmet with a fake plume. Kadu, naturally, is dressed as one of the Roman sailors. His armor's shinier. His shield bears the SPQR eagle. He doesn't like it any more than you do. So I stab you, or we hug it out. He jokes. You grin. Humorless. Depends on how hard you hit. You board the fake ship, which wobbles on its wooden base. Ropes stretch across the sides. A stagehand in the pit below cranks a wheel that rocks the platform back and forth. Rome's version of motion sickness. The trumpet sounds, and the battle begins. It's chaos, but choreographed. You leap from plank to plank, swing your sword in wide arcs, shout something about Roman taxes. The crowd laughs. Kadu charges. You clash. Blades. The impact rings sharp but planned. A few other fighters join locals, probably mercenaries staged to fall overboard or pretend to drown in sand. One man doesn't pretend. He slips off the plank, lands awkwardly, and doesn't rise. The crowd gasps, then applauds. They think it's part of the show. You move on, because that's what the script demands. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Naumachien of all spectacles were staged by emperors to show Rome's dominion over land and sea. Some involved actual ships and flooded basins. Others, like this one, were mere illusions. But the message was always the same. Rome conquers everywhere. And your fringe detail. In at least one recorded event under Emperor Claudius, prisoners were forced to fight a sea battle to the death on an artificial lake. When they greeted the emperor with the traditional Ave Caesar, Morituri te salutant, hail, Caesar, we who are about to die salute you. He supposedly responded with silence. Whether he found it distasteful or simply boring, no one knows. Back in your arena, the final blow is staged. Kadu knocks the sword from your hand. You fall back, arms spread, mock defeated. The crowd cheers. He steps over you, raises his sword, then flips it around and offers the hilt. You take it. Rise. Bow to the governor's box. You live. Because today, your death wasn't written in. After the match, back in the holding pen, a small boy hands you a wooden toy ship with your name scratched into the side. You blink. Made it myself, he says proudly, before running off. You stare at the ship, thumb tracing the tiny carved letters. It's not a weapon. It's not a mask. It's not a coin. It's a gift. And somehow, that strikes deeper than any blade you've faced. You place it on your cot that night like a treasure, because maybe, for just a moment, someone saw you as more than a role. You don't expect to keep the toy ship. Nothing in this life is yours for long. Food disappears. Friends vanish. Armor is traded, stolen, or buried with you if you're lucky. Even your name changes with each province and each script. But the ship stays. You carry it wrapped in cloth inside your travel bag, tucked between bandages and bronze trinkets. It's not useful. It's just a sliver of kindness in a world that forgot how to be kind. A few days later, you arrive in a seaside town on the western coast of Italia, a port city, busy with merchants and sailors, and with an amphitheater shaped like a crescent moon, smaller than Rome's, but better maintained. Fresh white stone, red banners snapping in the wind, a marketplace humming nearby, as if selling dried fish and Gladiator marcas belongs in the same conversation. Your sponsor greets you with a new robe and an oily smile. You'll like this one, he says. Very cultured crowd. They appreciate subtlety. You're not sure if that means fewer decapitations or just louder clapping, but you soon find out. Because today's match is different. You're not in armor. You're in costume, a scholar's robe, a golden wreath, a scroll tucked into your belt, and a ceremonial dagger hanging uselessly from your side. What is this? You ask the costumer. Of course it is. You've been cast in a dramatized historical scene, the fall of a Roman philosopher who insulted the emperor and was forced to fight for his life in the arena. A fictional version of a real execution. And your opponent, a man dressed as a barbarian king. Furs, war paint, something that looks like a Viking helmet. Even though you know those don't exist yet. He swings a massive axe and roars like a festival drunk. It's theater, but with real swords. The crowd doesn't want a fair fight. They want to see a philosopher fall. They want to laugh as the so-called man of ideas learns what steel tastes like. So you give them tension, you circle, you hesitate, you look scared, you play your part, then you surprise everyone. You win, not by strength, by strategy. You let him overextend. You trip him with your rope. You land a blow not fatal, but convincing. The audience gasps, then cheers. They love it. The thinker who triumphs with wit. After the match, the barbarian laughs and slaps you on the back. Nice footwork. Genius, he says. Maybe next time I wear the toga. You both get paid in wine and roasted figs. Later, in your quarters, you unwrap the toy ship and set it by the window. The sun's reflection dances across its tiny wooden hull, and you realize you've crossed some invisible line. You're no longer just a survivor. You're a character they write stories around. You're a type, the clever one. The crowd doesn't cheer for you. They cheer for what they think you represent. Here's your historical fact. Reenactments in Roman amphitheaters weren't limited to myths or legends. Some were political. Executions were often dressed up as moral parables. Prisoners might be made to act out the sins that earned them punishment before they were torn apart by animals. And your fringe tidbit. Some governors used these performances to subtly criticize their rivals. A poorly disguised philosopher might resemble a senator. A traitor king might carry the colors of a neighboring governor's army. The arena wasn't just entertainment, it was politics. You lie in bed that night, the ship on the sill and the dagger still at your side. You watch the moon rise. Tomorrow, you've been told, you'll reenact the death of a poet who offended the gods. You wonder if the crowd will laugh again. You wonder if you'll be asked to die. And you wonder, would they even know the difference anymore? The poet dies at sunrise. Well, that's the script, anyway. The arena is quiet this time. Not roaring, but buzzing, an early crowd. Mostly citizens and merchants, with time to kill before the market opens. No children, no snacks, just rustling cloaks and squinting eyes. You stand in a simple tunic, hands bound loosely in front of you, a wax tablet at your feet and a wooden stylus tucked behind your ear. The poet's tools, his only weapons. Your opponent plays the divine punisher, a man painted head to toe in gold, draped in fake lightning bolts, wielding a massive hammer shaped like a thunderclap. His role is clear. You've mocked the gods. Now he makes an example of you. The crowd loves morality plays. Even if they can't agree on the morals. The trumpet sounds. You kneel. He paces around you, booming a rehearsed monologue. Something about pride, hubris, consequence. It's theater again, except the ending isn't faked. Because today, you change the ending. Instead of accepting your fate, you stand. You pick up the wax tablet and hurl it not at him, but into the crowd. A child laughs. Someone gasps. You speak. Loudly, clearly, not your lines, your own. You say, words don't offend the gods. They offend the men pretending to be gods. The crowd murmurs. Your opponent freezes, confused. You raise your hands, and then drop to your knees again. But not in surrender. In defiance. He pauses. The crowd waits. Then, he lowers his hammer. You've shifted the narrative again. The crowd thinks it's part of the show. An unexpected twist. A redemption arc. They applaud. You're escorted out with no blood spilled. Backstage, the governor's aide is waiting. Arms crossed. Jaw tense. Next time, he says, you stick to the script. You don't answer, because you've discovered something powerful. The crowd doesn't just want blood. They want emotion. Surprise. Something that feels true, even if it's not. And if you're clever, you can give them truth dressed up as fiction. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Roman spectacles were often flexible. While some executions and fights were rigidly choreographed, others left room for improvisation provided the crowd approved. Fighters who could read the audience sometimes saved their own lives. And your fringe tidbit. There are rare accounts of prisoners or actors improvising mid-performance, changing lines, gestures, even dying in ways the crowd found more poetic. In one case, a condemned man reportedly sang as he was torn apart. The crowd called it art. Later in your quarters, you pull the stylus from your belt and stare at it. Light pointless. But it shifted something. Kadu enters, holding 2 wooden cups of watered wine. You're either brave, he says, or you're tired of this place. You take a sip. Can't it be both? He grins. The toy ship is still on the sill. The wind rattles the shutters. In the street below, a man shouts about olives. Another sings badly about love. And for once, you almost feel something like peace. Until a messenger knocks on your door. You're summoned, he says. New city, new games. Pack your things. You don't ask where. It doesn't matter anymore. You're not just traveling for games now. You're traveling because the story needs you. The next city is older than it looks. The amphitheater is cracked along its foundation. Moss creeps between the stones. The benches are warped and faded, like teeth dulled from centuries of biting down on spectacle. The town smells of olives and salt. The people, suspicious, quiet, too quiet for Rome. You ride in with the caravan at dusk. your armor packed away in a crate, your crest barely visible under the grime of the road. Kadu rides beside you, half asleep in the saddle, his spear jostling against the side of the cart with each bump. Feels like a ghost town, he mutters, rubbing his eyes. You nod. Let's hope we're not the ghosts. You're ushered into quarters quickly. Too quickly. There's no procession, no welcoming official with a scroll, an oily voice. Just a tired local manager who glances at you once, sighs, and says, "You'll be fighting locals." That's never a good sign. Locals don't fight clean. They don't fight for narrative. They fight because they've been told to. You learn later that this town had a revolt not long ago. Farmers protesting grain taxes. A few soldiers were killed. The governor newly installed and desperate to look decisive ordered a celebration of unity, which, in Roman politics, translates to several days of bloodsport. And guess who's the headline act? That night, as you prepare, Kadu sharpens his blade with deliberate slowness. They're not trained, he says, which means they're dangerous. He's right. Trained fighters are predictable. Amateurs are chaos. You both suit up. No costumes this time. No reenactment. Just steel and sweat. The crowd doesn't want drama. They want to see Rome win. You step into the arena under the sky above is navy blue, the stars just starting to peek through. The air smells of damp earth and resentment. Your opponents are already waiting. 4 of them. All wiry, all sunburned. One has a farming sickle. They wear no armor, just tunics, stained by fear and dirt. The crowd cheers, but it's not joyful, it's nervous. Like they're trying to convince themselves that this is entertainment, not retribution. A horn sounds. They charge. The first comes straight at you, teeth bared, club raised high. You sidestep, sweep his legs, pin him to the ground. You don't kill him, just knock the wind out of him and leave him coughing in the dust. The second is faster, swings wildly. You block with your shield, strike with your hilt. He crumples. Kadu is less delicate. He takes down the third with a spear thrust to the shoulder, fast and clean. The fourth, the one with the sickle, surrenders, before reaching you, throwing the blade at your feet and dropping to his knees. The crowd hesitates. Then, they clap. It's relieved, because no one died. And maybe, just maybe, they realized they didn't want death after all. Here's your historical fact. Rome often used gladiatorial games as punishment for rebellious provenance, but the entertainment was as much about reasserting dominance as it was about pleasing the public. Victory was propaganda, your fringe tidbit. Some towns resisted these games not with riots, but with silence, poor attendance, muted applause. A subtle rebellion against the idea that watching neighbors die was a cause for celebration. Back in your quarters, Kadu tosses his helmet aside and collapses onto the cot. They'll write that we were merciful, he says. But really, they just didn't give us a reason to be cruel. You clean your sword, slowly. Outside, the town is quiet again. But this time it doesn't feel like fear. It feels like something else. A city remembering its conscience. By morning, the story has spread. The match isn't described as a fight. It's called a lesson. The hawk and the spearman spared the rebels. Rome's mercy is sharper than its sword. Even savages can be tamed. The locals walk straighter in the streets, but they don't look you in the eye. And Rome spins it as a triumph of discipline. You're not just entertainers nor your political tools, rebranded as instruments of peace. Even when you're sent to kill, the absence of death becomes a performance. You receive a scroll with a wax seal. Inside a list of names. At the bottom, yours. It's a new schedule. You've been selected for a multi-city Sakita Rare honor reserved for the most compelling fighters. You'll perform in some of the most important Roman territories over the next 3 months. 10 cities, 10 amphitheaters, 10 crowds who think they know your story before you step into the arena. Kadu looks at the scroll, then at you. Well, he says, "At least, we're not boring. You travel by river now faster than carts, safer than foot. The barge is quiet, wide, and covered in bright red sails. Someone has carved your name into one of the wooden support beams. You don't know whether to be flattered or worried. On the second day, your barge stops in a small riverside village where no arena stands, no games are scheduled, and no governor waits with a speech. But the children are waiting, dozens of them, some dressed in makeshift armor wooden bowls on their heads, tunics cinched with rope. A few hold toy swords. One girl has painted a hawk on her shield with crushed berries. When they see you step off the boat, they cheer. Real, unfiltered, joyful cheers. No blood required. You kneel, speak with them, show one boy how to hold his stick like a real blade. Kadu teaches another how to block with a bucket lid. There's no script, no sponsor watching, no one keeping score. Just people. Just connection. A local woman hands you a loaf of bread and says, "Thank you for yesterday." You ask what she means, she shrugs. "I heard you didn't kill when you could have." That's enough. That night, you don't sleep in the boat. You sleep on straw in a warm barn with the sound of goats outside and the smell of apples in the air. It's the first peaceful sleep you've had in weeks. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Roman gladiators were sometimes used as public figures, sent on tours, not only to fight but to inspire. The empire believed spectacle was a kind of language one that communicated Rome's values to every corner it reached. And your fringe tidbit, some of these public figures were so popular that towns would petition to keep them. Not as fighters, as symbols, as proof that even the most brutal parts of Rome could produce something. Human, you leave at dawn. No coins, just handshakes and packed bread. Kadu smiles as you board. They liked us better than the senators. You nod, that's the problem. Because the more people see your mercy, the more Rome watches with narrowed eyes. Mercy is dangerous when it becomes popular. The next city is already preparing for your arrival. Posters hang from stone arches. The hawk returns with his blade and his conscience. And somewhere deep inside, you begin to wonder, how long can you keep walking this line before the blade tips against you? The next arena is massive. Not Colosseum massive, but close enough to make you blink twice when the gate opens. Stone seats rise in steep, perfect tiers. The walls are newly plastered, frescoed with images of victorious warriors, real and mythic, locked in impossible poses. One man beheading a hydra, another punching a lion, one smiling while covered in arrows. You and Kadu walk through the tunnel together, your boots echoing against clean marble. "I don't like it," he says. "Low. Too quiet," you ask. "Too perfect." You're not wrong. This city, this arena, feels like someone's idea of what Rome wants to be. Sanitized, idealized. The sand smells faintly of perfume. There's even music playing from hidden alcoves. You meet the editor, the man who oversees the games here. He's polished, draped in crimson, and wearing a gold ring so large it could double as a knuckle. "Gentlemen," he says with a rehearsed smile, "you'll be reenacting the conquest of Kadu stiffens beside you. You remember your history. Numantia was a city in Hispania that resisted Roman conquest for years. It was eventually crushed, its people slaughtered or sold. One of the bloodier pages in Rome's playbook, Kadu is to play the Numantian rebel leader. The Roman general, of course. It's just performance," the editor says, "but feel free to make it stirring." You don't say anything. Kadu doesn't, either. You suit up, the armor gleams. Too much. It hasn't seen a real battle, just torchlight and flattery. Kadu's rebel costume is worse. A rough tunic, leather cords, a cracked wooden shield painted to look broken. The crowd is already roaring as you enter. This isn't a story about survival. It's a retelling. One where the outcome is fixed and your role has already been decided. The trumpet sounds. Kadu. The blows come fast, but they're practiced. Controlled. You both know how to fight each other now, not to kill, but to sell the myth. Still, something's different. Kadu is sharper today. His movements tighter. He's not overacting. He's channeling. There's rage in his eyes. Rage he's using. You realize then that this match means more than performance to him, because this script erases the real history of his people, replaces it with a clean Roman victory wrapped in music and polished marble. He's not playing the part. He's challenging it. He slams your shield, knocks you back. The crowd gasps. You counter harder than intended. Sparks fly. You lock blades, face to face. "Follow me," he whispers. "What?" He shoves you, not into the sand, but toward one of the decorative props, a fake wall of Numantia made from painted wood. He slashes it down with a single swing, turning to the crowd. "This isn't a reenactment," he shouts. "It's a lie." You stand, sword lowered. The arena goes silent. And then cheers, confused, hesitant at first, but then louder. Some people stand, others officials do not. Later, the editor visits you in the corridor, jaw clenched. "That was not the ending. I approved." You meet his eyes. That was the ending they needed. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Roman games often glorified Rome's past, presenting conquests as noble victories and rebels as villains. It was a tool of state storytelling. And here's your fringe tidbit. In some rare moments, performers subverted the narrative, turning executions or reenactments into impromptu resistance. Most of those stories didn't survive, but a few did. Barely. Back in your quarters, Kadu sits, cross-legged, eating a pear like nothing happened. You know they're going to be watching us closer now. You say. He shrugs. Good. Then they'll see us. You nod. And for the first time, you realize something profound. You're no longer a gladiator pretending to be a symbol. You are the symbol now. And symbols, they don't die easily. You don't leave the city right away. They keep you for an extra 2 nights claiming rest, but really just watching. The guards aren't hostile, but they're more frequent. They loiter outside your door now. They ask more questions. They smile less. No one talks about the Numancia match. Not officially, but on the streets, it's all they talk about. Vendors sell miniature wooden replicas of the broken wall. Children imitate Kadu's final stance. Someone sketches your face on the side of a tavern wall, arm raised, sword, lowered not in dominance, but in refusal. It's spreading. Too fast. By the time your next city is announced, it's clear you're being not to another amphitheater, but to an inquiry. A senator's traveling court is stationed nearby, supposedly reviewing provincial tax records, but somehow, your names appear on the scroll of persons of interest. You and Kadu ride together, surrounded by soldiers, not chained, not cuffed, but it's a different kind of prison. At the camp, you're led to a tent. Inside, a long wooden table, 1 chair on your side, 3 on the other. The middle seat is filled by a man in his 60s, bald, with a kind of face that's never surprised. Senator Alpiana, sit, he says, not unkindly. You sit. He doesn't look up from his scroll. You've been gaining popularity, he says. You say nothing, which would be commendable, he continues, if it weren't accompanied by improvised speeches, script deviations, and thematic choices that border on rebellion. Still silent. He looks up finally. His eyes are tired, not cruel, just used to being obeyed. Do you consider yourself a danger, Hawk? You blink. To whom? He doesn't smile. To the narrative, he says. To Rome's story. We write it with blood and stone. You've begun scribbling in the margins. You want to say 1,000 things, but you've learned restraint is more powerful than rage. So you simply reply, I followed the crowd. He studies you, then speaks, low, measured. Let me explain something. We don't need the people to think. We need them to cheer, loudly, on cue. And if a man makes them cheer for the wrong reason, he leans forward. That man becomes dangerous. He stands, dismisses you with a flick. You're free to go. For now. But from this point forward, we'll be watching not just what you do, but why the crowd loves you for it. Outside the tent, Kadu waits, arms crossed. Well, he asks. They're scared. You say. He grins. You travel in silence after that. 2 days, then 3. No arena appearances, no announcements. Then finally, a message arrives. 1 more match. Not in the city. In a private villa. An elite party. Rich guests. No crowd. No public. Just the powerful. You and Kadu are to fight each other. Lightly, the scroll says. With style. But something feels off. You arrive at the villa before dawn. Its palatial columns and gardens. Marble statues and torches flickering in the hallways. You're led to a perfectly polished arena in the courtyard. And waiting there is Tavarossia Blink. He nods, solemn. Change of plans. The servant says behind you. 3 fighters, 1 prize. No scripts, no costumes, no show. This is a test. Or a warning. You hear the gate close behind you. Here's your historical fact. Private gladiatorial exhibitions were common among Rome's elite. Invitations to exclusive bouts became status symbols. Often, these matches were more brutal than public ones because no one was watching except the people who didn't care what happened next. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some gladiators were summoned for duels meant to send messages, not to the people but to each other. A lesson wrapped in pageantry, sharpened by power. You, Kadu, and Tavros now circle one another. You all understand. No one dies today, unless the message requires it. The villa courtyard is too quiet. The only sounds are the rustle of linen robes from the onlookers seated in the shade, sipping spiced wine, and the faint clink of polished weapons shifting in 3 pairs of tense hands. You, Kadu, and Tavros stand in a triangle, equidistant, waiting for someone to say, go, but they don't. There's no trumpet, no signal, just silence, because this isn't a match, it's a message. Not from the crowd, from the ones above the crowd. One of the seated elites A woman draped in purple silks gestures lazily with her hand. Not toward the arena, not toward you, just generally, as if this is beneath her interest. Tavros catches your eye. He's breathing slow and steady, no emotion, no tension, just presence. You remember sparing him. The crowd remembered it, too. So did Rome. Cardu stands loose and ready, spear in hand, shield lowered but not relaxed, focused. Measuring every twitch, you nod barely. He nods back. He charges, not at you, at the crowd. No one expects it. He doesn't reach them. Two guards intercept. He drops to his knees, hands raised, palms up. The message is clear. I'm done performing. One of the nobles stands. The games master, maybe. He claps slowly, the kind of clap you give not for appreciation but for control. Begin, he says, like nothing happened. But something did. You and Kadu turn to each other. He says it first, under his breath. We play it, you nod. Fast, clean, and over. You clash. Your blades meet with the sound of intent, not hatred. You duck, spin, slam your shield into his shoulder. He rolls, sweeps your legs. You recover, slash, past his arm, just grazing the leather. Tavros watches, breathing deeply, not moving. You both keep it tight, snappy, enough sweat to show effort, enough close calls to hold interest, but no blood, no mistakes. And finally, you land a finishing blow, your sword to Kadu's chest. Not piercing, just touching. He drops to one knee, gasping like a wounded stag. The nobles clap again, a little more enthusiastically. You help him to his feet. The message they receive, they obeyed. The message you've sent. We chose how, after the match, you're not dismissed. You're invited to a banquet. This is where the power reveals its claws with a smile. Golden couches, wine in obsidian cups, fruits from places you've never seen, dancers, musicians. The air reeks of honey and ego. You're seated at a low table beside a senator. He doesn't ask your name, just gestures to the food and says, eat. You'll need your strength. You glance at Tavros across the way. He's picking apart a fig with a tiny silver fork, eyes distant. Kadu doesn't eat. I feel like a dog given table scraps, he mutters. You whisper back, no. We're the entertainment. He smirks. Same thing. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Private gladiator banquets were real. Wealthy patrons loved to parade their champions like prized animals, dressing them in fine robes, feeding them delicacies, and bragging about their ownership. Your fringe tidbit. In some recorded cases, gladiators were auctioned during or after these feasts. Not as fighters but as conversation pieces. How much for the one who spared the pirate? What's the asking price for the man who won without killing? You feel the weight of your own fame curling around your ankles like chains. As the wine flows and the jokes grow sharper, you realize something. They don't admire you, they don't fear you, they enjoy you. And enjoyment is the most dangerous thing you can inspire in Rome's elite, because once they tire of it, they crush it. That night, Kadu pulls you aside before sleep. We have to end this. You nod. But how? He looks up at the moon. When the stage gets too clean, he says, sometimes the only way to make them listen is to set it on fire. You lie awake for hours thinking about what that could mean, because the markers are getting bigger, and the message is growing heavier. And eventually, someone will try to silence you. You just have to speak louder first. The next match is held in a capital city, the largest one yet since your departure from Rome. Grand, cold, and veined, with stone roads that shine like oil in the rain. You arrive under a sky the color of old iron, escorted by officials who don't smile and guards who never blink. The posters are already up. The Return of the Hawk. Your name is in gold leaf now, Kadu's beneath yours. Smaller. Tavros is listed too, simply as the Beast. There are no titles of honor, only roles. This isn't about survival anymore. It's about a climax. You're not fighting one match. You're headlining a spectacle, a multi-act event featuring animals, executions, mock sea battles, and a glorious finale in which the three of you will reenact the mythical last trial of the Godza story. Most of the crowd won't even pretend to understand, but they'll love it anyway. Because it ends with one man dying, and they're expecting it to be real. You're told nothing about how it ends. No stage directions, no fixed lines, just the hint, laced through the games master's grin. Make it unforgettable. Kadu sharpens his blade in silence the night before. The toy ship still rides in your bag, even though you haven't touched it in days. You don't have to. It's always there, whispering who you used to be. You know they'll want blood, Kadu says. You nod. They always do. He looks at you for a long moment. Not yours. You don't answer, because you're not sure whose it will be. The next morning, you dress not in armor, but in robes. The gods wear robes, gold trimmed with polished breastplates and high-plumed helmets that clang when you walk. Your sword is ceremonial, but sharp. All the props are. Tavros is already in the arena when you arrive. Towering, masked, the perfect villain. The crowd hums like a hive. They don't care what story you're telling. They just want it to sting. The match begins with a chorus, a ring of musicians wailing over drum beats as dancers swirl in mock prayer. You and Kadu descend opposite staircases. Tavros stands center stage, framed by flame and shadow, and then, without cue, he lunges. Not at you, at the choreographer. The man doesn't even have time to scream. The back of his head hits stone before the blood starts pooling. Gasps. Real ones. This wasn't in the script. You and Kadu hesitate for only a second, then you follow. Not to kill, to take control. You run toward the center, knock aside one of the guards with the flat of your blade, and shout, voice ringing over the arena. This story ends differently. The crowd stares, stunned. Then someone cheers. Then everyone does. They think it's part of the show. So you keep going. You pull Tavros towards you and lock blades not striking, just pushing, making it look good. Kadu circles, shouting lines that aren't part of any known myth. You don't care, because this moment isn't about the gods. It's about you, and in front of 20,000 spectators, you craft your own legend. Tavros falls, dramatically, not dead, just ended. You raise your sword not to kill, but to signal the end. Then you drop it, and raise your hand instead. Kadu mirrors you. So does Tavros 3, raised hands. No blood, no victor, just silence, and then thunder, applause, stomping, a wave of noise that nearly topples the banners overhead. You gave them an ending they didn't expect, but one they believed. Here's your mainstream fact. By the late Empire, Roman games became increasingly theatrical. Fights were sometimes staged with dramatic death scenes, moral arcs, and even audience-driven outcomes. Rome flirted with fiction as long as the illusion remained intact. Your fringe tidbit. In one rare case, a gladiator match inspired a riot because the crowd felt the wrong man had been killed. The idea that death could be written but not earned was too much for them to stomach. Back in the chambers below, the games master meets you, eyes wide, voice shaking. Not what I ordered, he says. No, you answer. It was better. Tavros just nods, still silent behind his mask. You leave that city with 3 things. A new reputation, not just a fighter, but a storyteller. A warning from your sponsor, they'll let you play with fire until you burn something they care about. A sealed invitation from Rome, an imperial audience. The center has noticed you again, and this time, they're not smiling. The carriage to Rome is silent, not because no one's speaking, because no one dares. You, Kadu, and Tavros ride together, but even the friendship you forged over blood and sand feels fragile under the weight of this summons. Rome doesn't call you back to praise you, it calls you back to correct you. The roads leading into the capital are lined with tourists, merchants, priests, and statues. So many statues. Every corner has a Caesar's face frozen in smug triumph. Every fountain whispers of conquest. Every column says, "We built the world, and we own the ending." You enter through the Porta Triumphalis, the gate reserved for victors. Your carriage isn't met with roses. It's met with a line of black armored guards, and a single official with ink-stained hands. You are not taken to the Colosseum. You are taken to the Palatine Hill, the heart of empire, the palace itself. Your escort leaves you in a garden artfully overgrown, filled with sculptures of men who killed to be remembered. You're told to wait, and wait you do, a full hour before a man appears. He's not tall, he's not muscular, he doesn't look like he's ever held a sword. But when he enters, the air changes. This is Domitian Emperor, Godhead, patron of the games. He wears no crown. He doesn't need to. I've been watching, he says, circling slowly. You've been redefining things. You stand still. I allow Rome's people to dream, he continues. But I don't allow them to doubt. He stops inches from you. You've made them question the meaning of a fight. You made them cheer for restraint. That's dangerous. It makes them feel human again. He spits the word like a curse. You finally speak. And if that's the cost of peace... He smiles, sadly. There is no peace. He says, only order. He paces. You're popular now. I can't kill you in the street. That would make you a martyr. So instead, he says, you'll fight one last match. You knew this was coming. In the Colosseum, he adds. At festival, opening ceremony, full crowd, no tricks, no metaphors, no messages. He turns, and you'll lose. You blink to who he doesn't answer. But you already know. To Rome. That's the opponent. Here's your historical fact. Emperors used gladiatorial games as direct tools of control. Fighters who became too beloved were sometimes removed not just by death, but by orchestration. The games weren't just politics, they were pageants of power. Your fringe tidbit. One gladiator became so adored that rumors spread he could sway elections. He died days later, officially, by accident. Historians aren't convinced. Back in the holding chambers below the Colosseum, you're given new armor. Gleaming, customized, lighter than usual. To light, you realize the padding is thinner. The blade edges aren't dull. You're not meant to survive. Kadu approaches as you prepare. He doesn't speak right away. Then, do we fight their story? You meet his eyes. No, you say we finish ours. That night, under torchlight and thunderous noise, the Colosseum is reborn. Not as a place of death, but as the final chapter. Tavros stands across the arena from you, masked, back in the Minotaur helm. You and Kadu stand together. No script, no lines, just one rule. Do not let Rome choose the ending. The gates rise, not slowly, not with tension but with theatrical precision. Trumpets blare, drums pound like war horses at a gallop. Rose petals fall from unseen hands above. The audience erupts. It's not excitement, it's ritual. This is the Ludi Romani, Rome's grandest festival of games. And you are the headliner sacrifice. Tavros enters first, the perfect villain, horned and gold-plated, silent and monstrous. The crowd chants his name like thunder caught in stone. Then comes Kadu, standing tall in red gold armor, eyes scanning the arena with steady calm. His presence is your anchor. Then the hawk. Your armor glints unnaturally. It's been polished for visibility, not protection. Your blade is thinner than usual, sharp, yes, but made for flair, not survival. You step into the sunlight anyway. The Colosseum has never looked bigger, not in your first match, not in your worst. It feels like it's watching you now, breathing. You can't see Domitian, but you feel him. Somewhere above, in a private box, beneath velvet curtains, sipping something sweet, watching the final act of a play you rewrote without permission. The announcer reads from a scroll. The trial of the three. The crowd roars. The announcer continues. Only one shall leave. But everyone already knows who's supposed to win. Tavros is meant to kill you. Kadu is meant to die trying to stop him. Rome is meant to remind its people. Never love anything that bleeds. The horn sounds. Tavros charges. Faster than expected. Almost eager. You block, spin, slide back, deflect an overhead blow that cracks your shoulder like thunder. Kadu intercepts, ramming his shield into Tavros' side, sending him staggering. Then, it begins. Not a brawl, a ballad. A story you choreographed not with scripts, but with trust. Kadu and Tavros don't fight each other, they fight with you. 3 fighters, 1 arena, and not one of you is playing the role assigned. The crowd doesn't understand it at first. They scream names, they chant for blood, but what they see is something else. Grace, violence, precision, no killing blows, no pauses for effect, only the truth of motion, fluid, fast, and refusing to collapse into a finality Rome demanded. Tavros pins you. You break free. Kadu factor calls. Tavros rolls away, disarms, a spear flung by a guard on the sideline, probably meant to tip the fight back to plan. The crowd gasps. They're starting to get it. You're not performing for them anymore. You're performing for the record. And maybe for something greater. Tavros takes a hit to the ribs. Drops. Not fatal. Just a drop. You offer a hand. He takes it. That's the moment it all cracks. The crowd hesitates. Then cheers. Real cheers. Not for blood. For something they don't have a name for yet. The gate rattles, not from below, from the Emperor's box. Another weapon is thrown in it. They're trying to force the ending, drag you back into their narrative. Kadu kicks it aside, hard. You lift your sword, turn to the box. You bow low. Not in submission. In defiance. The audience follows. The roar is different now. Not for a victor, not for a kill, but for 3 men who made it through the machine and broke the gears on the way out. Here's your historical fact. In rare cases, public opinion could sway even the emperor. Gladiators spared by the crowd sometimes became folk heroes, impossible to punish without inciting unrest. Here's your fringe tidbit. During one festival in the late Empire, the crowd chanted for hours to spare a man who refused to kill his opponent. The emperor, furious, relented. That man disappeared weeks later. But the chant was never forgotten. After the match, you're not escorted back underground. You're led up into the stands, up into history, up into the hearts of a people who, just for a moment, remembered that gladiators were human, that strength wasn't always about killing, that mercy could be louder than the sword. Tavros limps beside you. Kadu smiles, for the first time in days. You breathe, and for now, you're still alive. The Colosseum clears slowly, like a tide dragging away stunned swimmers. No riot, no rebellion, just thoughtfulness, a lingering tension in the air, like a song that ends on the wrong chord and makes your bones itch. You, Kadu, and Tavros are escorted not by guards, but by officials with 2 wide smiles. No chains, no words, just nods and meaningless courtesies. The kind they offer to dangerous men they're not quite sure how to punish. You're brought not to a cell, but a reception room carved into the foundation of the arena, cool, shaded, with cushions and citrus water. You wait there, an hour, then 2. Then, the curtains part, and Domitian enters, alone. No guards, no weapons, just robes and that tired emperor look. The one that says, "I'm not mad, I'm just calculating your funeral." He doesn't sit, doesn't blink. So, he says, softly, "That's the ending you chose." You don't speak, because what could you say? That it felt right, that the crowd loved it, that they cheered mercy. He raises a hand. 3 fingers, 3 men. One of you dies, he says. To preserve the illusion of risk, your heart freezes. He means it. He's going to choose one of you to die, not because you lost, but because no one did. Because the system needs a body. You have the face of a symbol, he says, but you already betrayed your role. To Kadu, you've become a speaker when you were only meant to be steel. Then, to you, Hulk, you've made yourself into a mirror. The people look at you and see something better than themselves. That's more dangerous than a sword. He walks a slow circle around the room. So, we're left with a problem. Kill you, and the people riot. Spare you, and you breed hope. He stops, then chuckles, low and dry. Hope is worse than rage. Rage, we can redirect. Hope, ... changes things. You still say nothing, because anything you say would be a challenge, and you're done playing their game. Domitian sighs. You've left me no choice. He walks out. That's it. No decision. No threat. Just silence. You're left in the room for hours. Then, without warning, you're released. Not escorted, not watched, just handed your belongings and shown the street. You walk through Rome not as a hero, not as a fugitive, but as a question. People stare. Some nod. No one applauds. You pass by a statue of Mars with a new scratch down its cheek. You see a merchant selling small wooden carvings of a man holding a sword in one hand and a scroll in the other. He doesn't say your name. He doesn't have to. You walk past the old alley where you once fought a stray dog for a crust of bread. You pass the fountain where Kadu knocks you over your first week as a trainee. You pass a window where a boy presses his face to the glass and mouths the words, "I saw you." Here's your mainstream historical fact. After certain matches, gladiators were released with Rhodesia wooden swords symbolizing freedom. Some disappeared. Some taught. Some were assassinated in alleyways years later. And your fringe tidbit, one gladiator supposedly vanished into the provinces and became a bard, singing songs not of victory but of what it cost. That night, you sleep on a rooftop. No guards, no fences, no sand, just wind, and the city breathing below you. Kadu appears sometime before dawn and tosses you an apple. "Still alive," he says. You nod. He lies down beside you. Tavros follows, grumbling. But present, you eat, in silence. Rome wakes slowly, and somewhere deep inside, The Colosseum waits for its next spectacle. But you've already finished your story. The question now is, what will you write next? The carriage to Rome is silent, not because no one's speaking, because no one dares. You, Kadu, and Tavaros ride together, but even the friendship you forged over blood and sand feels fragile under the weight of this summons. Rome doesn't call you back to praise you, it calls you back to correct you. The roads leading into the capital are lined with tourists, merchants, priests, and statues. So many statues. Every corner has a Caesar's face frozen in smug triumph. Every fountain whispers of conquest. Every column says, "We built the world, and we own the ending." You enter through the Porta Triumphalis, the gate reserved for victors. Your carriage isn't met with roses. It's met with a line of black armored guards, and a single official with ink-stained hands. You are not taken to the Colosseum. You are taken to the Palatine Hill, the heart of empire, the palace itself. Your escort leaves you in a garden artfully overgrown, filled with sculptures of men who killed to be remembered. You're told to wait, and wait you do, a full hour before a man appears. He's not tall, he's not muscular, he doesn't look like he's ever held a sword. But when he enters, the air changes. This is Domitian Emperor, Godhead, patron of the games. He wears no crown, he doesn't need to. "I've been watching," he says, circling slowly. "You've been redefining things. You stand still. I allow Rome's people to dream," he continues. "But I don't allow them to doubt." He stops inches from you. You've made them question the meaning of a fight. You made them cheer for restraint. That's dangerous. It makes them feel human again. He spits the word like a curse. You finally speak. "And if that's the cost of peace..." He smiles, sadly. "There is no peace," he says. "Only order." He paces. "You're popular now. I can't kill you in the street. That would make you a martyr. So instead," he says, "you'll fight one last match. You knew this was coming. In the Colosseum," he adds. "At festival, opening ceremony, full crowd, no tricks, no metaphors, no messages." He turns, "And you'll lose." You blink to who he doesn't answer, but you already know. To Rome. That's the opponent. Here's your historical fact. Emperors used gladiatorial games as direct tools of control. Fighters who became too beloved were sometimes removed not just by death, but by orchestration. The games weren't just politics, they were pageants of power. Your fringe tidbit. One gladiator became so adored that rumors spread he could sway elections. He died days later officially, by accident. Historians aren't convinced. Back in the holding chambers below the Colosseum, you're given new armor. Gleaming, customized, lighter than usual. To light, you realize the padding is thinner. The blade edges aren't dull. You're not meant to survive. Kadu approaches as you prepare. He doesn't speak right away. "Then, do we fight their story?" You meet his eyes. "No," you say, "we finish ours." That night, under torchlight and thunderous noise, the Colosseum is reborn. Not as a place of death, but as the final chapter. Tavros stands across the arena from you, masked, back in the Minotaur helm. You and Kadu stand together. No script, no lines, just one rule. Do not let Rome choose the ending. The gates rise, not slowly, not with tension but with theatrical precision. Trumpets blare, drums pound like war horses at a gallop. Rose petals fall from unseen hands above. The audience erupts. It's not excitement, it's ritual. This is the Ludi Romani, Rome's grandest festival of games. And you are the headliner sacrifice. Tavros enters first, the perfect villain, horned and gold-plated, silent and monstrous. The crowd chants his name like thunder caught in stone. Then comes Kadu, standing tall in red gold armor, eyes scanning the arena with steady calm. His presence is your anchor. Then the hawk. Your armor glints unnaturally. It's been polished for visibility, not protection. Your blade is thinner than usual, sharp, yes, but made for flair, not survival. You step into the sunlight anyway. The Colosseum has never looked bigger, not in your first match, not in your worst. It feels like it's watching you now, breathing. You can't see Domitian, but you feel him. Somewhere above, in a private box, beneath velvet curtains, sipping something sweet, watching the final act of a play you rewrote without permission. The announcer reads from a scroll. The trial of the three. The crowd roars. The announcer continues. Only one shall leave. But everyone already knows who's supposed to win. Tavros is meant to kill you. Kadu is meant to die trying to stop him. Rome is meant to remind its people, never love anything that bleeds. The horn sounds. Tavros charges, faster than expected, almost eager. You block, spin, slide back, deflect an overhead blow that cracks your shoulder like thunder. Kadu intercepts, ramming his shield into Tavares' side, sending him staggering. Then, it begins. Not a brawl, a ballad, a story you choreographed not with scripts, but with trust. Kadu and Tavros don't fight each other, they fight with you. 3 fighters, 1 arena, and not one of you is playing the role assigned. The crowd doesn't understand it at first. They scream names, they chant for blood, but what they see is something else. Grace, violence, precision, no killing blows, no pauses for effect, only the truth of motion, fluid, fast, and refusing to collapse into a finality Rome demanded. Tavros pins you. You break free. Kadu factor calls. Tavros rolls away, disarms, a spear flung by a guard on the sideline, probably meant to tip the fight back to plan. The crowd gasps. They're starting to get it. You're not performing for them anymore. You're performing for the record, and maybe for something greater. Tavros takes a hit to the ribs, drops. Not fatal, just a drop. You offer a hand. He takes it. That's the moment it all cracks. The crowd hesitates. Then cheers. Real cheers. Not for blood, for something they don't have a name for yet. The gate rattles, not from below, from the Emperor's box. Another weapon is thrown in there. They're trying to force the ending, drag you back into their narrative. Kadu kicks it aside, hard. You lift your sword, turn to the box. You bow low. Not in submission, in defiance. The audience follows. The roar is different now. Not for a victor, not for a kill, but for 3 men who made it through the machine and broke the gears on the way out. Here's your historical fact. In rare cases, public opinion could sway even the emperor. Gladiators spared by the crowd sometimes became folk heroes, impossible to punish without inciting unrest. Here's your fringe tidbit. During one festival in the late Empire, the crowd chanted for hours to spare a man who refused to kill his opponent. The emperor, furious, relented. That man disappeared weeks later. But the chant was never forgotten. After the match, you're not escorted back underground. You're led up into the stands, up into history, up into the hearts of a people who, just for a moment, remembered that gladiators were human, that strength wasn't always about killing, that mercy could be louder than the sword. Tavros limps beside you. Kadu smiles, for the first time in days. You breathe, and for now, you're still alive. The Colosseum clears slowly, like a tide dragging away stunned swimmers. No riot, no rebellion, just thoughtfulness, a lingering tension in the air, like a song that ends on the wrong chord and makes your bones itch. You, Kadu, and Tavros are escorted not by guards, but by officials with 2 wide smiles. No chains, no words, just nods and meaningless courtesies. The kind they offer to dangerous men they're not quite sure how to punish. You're brought not to a cell, but a reception room carved into the foundation of the arena, cool, shaded, with cushions and citrus water. You wait there, an hour, then 2. Then, the curtains part, and Domitian enters, alone. No guards, no weapons, just robes and that tired emperor look, the one that says, "I'm not mad, I'm just calculating your funeral." He doesn't sit, doesn't blink. So, he says, softly, "That's the ending you chose." You don't speak, because what could you say? That it felt right, that the crowd loved it, that they cheered mercy. He raises a hand. 3 fingers, 3 men. One of you dies, he says. To preserve the illusion of risk, your heart freezes. He means it. He's going to choose one of you to die, not because you lost, but because no one did. Because the system needs a body. You have the face of a symbol, he says, but you already betrayed your role. To Kadu, you've become a speaker when you were only meant to be steel. Then, to you, Hulk, you've made yourself into a mirror. The people look at you and see something better than themselves. That's more dangerous than a sword. He walks a slow circle around the room. So, we're left with a problem. Kill you, and the people riot. Spare you, and you breed hope. He stops, then chuckles, low and dry. Hope is worse than rage. Rage, we can redirect. Hope, ... changes things. You still say nothing, because anything you say would be a challenge, and you're done playing their game. Domitian sighs. You've left me no choice. He walks out. That's it. No decision. No threat. Just silence. You're left in the room for hours. Then, without warning, you're released. Not escorted, not watched, just handed your belongings and shown the street. You walk through Rome not as a hero, not as a fugitive, but as a question. People stare. Some nod. No one applauds. You pass by a statue of Mars with a new scratch down its cheek. You see a merchant selling small wooden carvings of a man holding a sword in one hand and a scroll in the other. He doesn't say your name. He doesn't have to. You walk past the old alley where you once fought a stray dog for a crust of bread. You pass the fountain where Kadu knocks you over your first week as a trainee. You pass a window where a boy presses his face to the glass and mouths the words, "I saw you." Here's your mainstream historical fact. After certain matches, gladiators were released with Rhodesia wooden swords symbolizing freedom. Some disappeared. Some taught. Some were assassinated in alleyways years later. And your fringe tidbit, one gladiator supposedly vanished into the provinces and became a bard, singing songs not of victory but of what it cost. That night, you sleep on a rooftop. No guards, no fences, no sand, just wind, and the city breathing below you. Kadu appears sometime before dawn and tosses you an apple. "Still alive," he says. You nod. He lies down beside you. Tavros follows, grumbling. But present, you eat in silence. Rome wakes slowly, and somewhere deep inside, the Colosseum waits for its next spectacle. But you've already finished your story. The question now is, what will you write next? Morning breaks over Rome like spilled gold. You watch it from that rooftop, the sunrise turning statues into silhouettes, and temple domes into bronze fire. It's quieter than expected, not silent, but slow, gentle, as if the city itself is unsure whether to keep breathing the way it did yesterday. The kind of morning that doesn't need a trumpet. Kadu stretches beside you, groaning like an old lion. "I think we won," he says, then or at least didn't lose. Tavros grunts. "I'll take not dying." You sit up slowly. Something in your chest feels lighter. The Colosseum still stands. Its shadow stretches across the heart of the city, unchanged. But something around it has shifted. The people move differently today. Less hurried, more awake. Down in the forum a woman is telling the story of yesterday's fight. She's getting it wrong, embellishing, dramatizing, making you taller than you are and claiming Kadu caught a falling spear mid. A group of children gasps at her every word. You don't correct her. Let it grow. Let the myth do what truth can reach ears that facts never will. You spend the next few days drifting. Not hiding. Just ... watching. You walk through streets you once feared. Sit on benches once forbidden to your class. Guards don't stop you. Some nod. One even salutes. A boy presses a folded parchment into your hand before running off. Inside, a rough drawing. You Kadu. Tavros. Above, the words we remember. No name, no reward. Just a whisper of permanence in a city built to forget. You hear whispers from the province that other gladiators are experimenting with new endings, that a match in Hispania ended with both fighters bowing instead of killing, that a Colosseum in Gaul went silent for 15 full minutes after a man dropped his sword and sang a funeral hymn instead. Maybe none of it's true, but maybe it is. Maybe you didn't just survive Rome. Maybe you cracked it. Here's your final mainstream historical fact. The games eventually faded. Costs rose. Spectacles dulled. Some emperors even banned them, but they didn't vanish overnight. They eroded match by match, crowd by crowd. Your last fringe tidbit. There are stories unverified, but passed down of a gladiator who walked out of the arena and became a teacher. His students didn't know his past, but he told them, the world can be changed. Even if you only live long enough to start the sentence, you find a quiet road leading out of Rome one evening. No ceremony, no guards, just dust and olive trees. Kadu catches up at the second hill, Tavros at the third. None of you say where you're going, because it doesn't matter. Not anymore. What matters is that you left a question in your place, and questions are more powerful than swords. And now, you lie still, not in the sand, not beneath the crowd's roar, but in your bed, in the quiet hum of the room around you. Maybe a fan's turning slowly overhead, maybe there's a breeze through the window, or maybe just a soft glow of your phone fading into black. You picture the Colosseum again, not with blood in the sand, but with refusal in the air. A man laying down his weapon, another offering a hand, a third raising it high, not in victory, but in solidarity, and the crowd formed once cheering something they couldn't explain. That's the story that matters. Not who won, not who bled, but who made the crowd feel something new. Let that image stay with you as you drift. The weight of armor sliding off your shoulders, the cool air brushing your cheeks. The city of Rome, old and vast and crumbling at the edges, finally learning how to listen. You're safe now. No more rolls, just quiet, just rest. Let your breathing slow, let your muscles soften. You've made it through the arena, the empire, and the noise. And here, at the end, you've claimed the one prize they could never offer, yourself. So, breathe easy, sink deep, and dream of a world where even the loudest cheers come from love.